Chapter 51. Although Christmas at the Granger family is not as grand as Hogwarts, it is still warm and important enough. On the day before Christmas, Qin Yu and Hermione helped the Grangers decorate their home. They also made a small Christmas tree and hung stars, snowflakes, ribbons, and other decorations on it. It looked very nice. Look. Then, the two slept for a while, and when they woke up the next day, Christmas Day, they saw a gift placed beside their bed. What Qin Yu received was a red and yellow scarf, which looked very warm at first glance, while Hermione's gift was a set of paintbrushes with a full range of colors, which surprised her so much that she asked Qin Yu to be a model. Draw him a picture. Early this morning, Mrs. Granger started busy with the Christmas dinner. Since it's Christmas, roasting turkey is a must. Through the advocacy of King Henry VIII and the promotion of King Edward VII, turkey, a delicacy from the New World, has become an essential Christmas main dish in the UK. A 10-pound turkey is the main ingredient today. When nothing happened, Qin Yu helped Mrs. Granger. Every family in the UK seems to have a secret roast turkey recipe passed down from their mother or grandmother, and Mrs. Granger is no exception. It is said that her secret recipe has been passed down for 4 generations. Of course, Qin Yu feels this is somewhat exaggerated. After cleaning the turkey, Mrs. Granger skillfully separated the skin and meat of the turkey with her hands, then spread butter mixed with thyme, sage, sea salt, and other spices in the middle, and then placed it on the fire. The outside of the chicken was evenly coated with a layer of this secret butter, and then she stuffed stuffing such as chopped carrots, onions, and celery loosely into the belly of the turkey. Finally, the processed turkey was put into the oven for roasting. During this period, Mrs. Granger had to open the oven every 30 minutes and carefully brush the dripping soup over the turkey to prevent it from burning. The skin of the chicken was dry and cracked. After waiting for 3 hours, the fragrant turkey was placed on the table. Together with some other delicacies, a sumptuous Christmas dinner started at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. After the festival and the delicious food, it is definitely necessary to open up the food. In short, the Grangers, Qin Yu, and Hermione were all very full. After the meal, another Christmas pudding is served, and it's complete. During Christmas, in addition to having a big meal at home, the Grangers took Qin Yu and Hermione around to see the Christmas streetlights, visit the Christmas market, and even went to a Christmas carnival held in a nearby park. Qin Yu and Hermione played like crazy for 2 days. And on the 3rd day after Christmas, a man wearing a black uniform and a black top hat appeared in front of Granger's house. This man was probably in his 20s and looked very polite. "Mr. Qin, Miss Granger, hello. I am a staff member of the Minor Wizards Registration Office under the Department of Magical Education of the Ministry of Magic. My name is Wade Brooke." The man introduced himself. Registration Office for Minor Wizards? This was the first time Qin Yu had heard of this department. However, Hermione knew it. When the little girl heard this, she frowned and asked curiously, "Didn't May come here before? Why didn't she come today?" May went to the International Magical Cooperation Department and was promoted. "Now I am responsible for the registration of underage wizards," Wade Brooke explained with a smile. "Oh, that's right." Hermione nodded. "Mr. Qin, your previous registration was reported directly by Professor Dumbledore, so it is normal not to know that the Underage Wizard Registration Office is also normal. Our department is mainly responsible for the management of underage wizards, and I am here this time. We will further verify your information and remind you and Miss Granger of some precautions outside the school," Wade Brooke explained his purpose. After listening to this, Qin Yu roughly understood what was going on. His previous identity issues were all handled by Lao Deng. Naturally, he did not understand this department. But Hermione was different. She had a dedicated contact person to register her identity. Yes, and judging from Hermione's tone, she was not unfamiliar with the Ministry of Magic employee named May. It was probably May who introduced Hermione to many things in the magical world, and she had an understanding of the magical world before enrolling in school. Qin Yu secretly guessed. After checking Wade's Ministry of Magic badge and confirming the authenticity of his identity, Qin Yu and Hermione let the man into their home. At this time, Mr. Granger was sitting on the sofa in the living room reading a copy of the Times, while Mrs. Granger was in the kitchen tidying up the cupboards and refrigerator. They were all a little surprised after seeing this guest. Fortunately, as the guardians of the little wizards, they were somewhat mentally prepared. So they asked the man who claimed to be an employee of the Ministry of Magic to go to Qin Yu's room to talk. Of course, little Hermione also followed. "That's right, Mr. Qin, Professor Dumbledore only registered your current home address and guardian information, and very little other content. Can you tell us about your situation in detail?" Wade asked in the room. After sitting down on the chair, he said straight to the point. Next to him, A paper form was floating, with an automatic recording quill parked on it, ready to record things at any time. Hermione, who was standing aside, opened her eyes wide in surprise when she saw the automatic recording quill. May came here before, but she didn't bring such a magical thing. Qin Yu was used to this kind of magic items, so he wasn't too surprised. After listening to Wade's words, he pondered for a moment and said slowly, I actually lost my previous memory for some reasons. I only remember that I was taken in by Mr. Granger and Mrs. Granger. Here. Later, I lost control of my magic, and I happened to be discovered by Professor Dumbledore, who enrolled me into Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. This is the situation. Qin Yu basically sought truth from facts and said what he could. After he finished speaking, Wade frowned slightly and said, Can't you remember anything about what happened before? It's not like I can't remember it at all. I can only remember certain things, such as the knowledge I learned and some life skills, Qin Yu said cautiously but calmly. There is indeed a little information, but it is not too unusual for the little wizard to encounter various accidents. Okay, I will record it first. Wade nodded and said. The feather pen brushed in midair and wrote down what Qin Yu said word for word on the registration form. After the recording was completed, Wade waved, and the registration form automatically rolled up and was put into his arms, and the automatic quill pen was also put into a pin case. After doing this, Wade faced the two children in the room and said seriously, Advertisement next. I would like to remind you about your activities outside school. According to the third paragraph of the Law on the Reasonable Restraint of Minor Wizards, wizards under the age of 17 are not allowed to deliberately or knowingly engage in illegal activities outside of school. If you use magic in front of muggles in the residential area, you will receive a warning letter from the Ministry of Magic. In serious cases, the Ministry of Magic's Office for Prohibiting the Abuse of Magic will send officials to investigate. In extremely serious cases, you will be subject to magic. The director of the Legal Enforcement Department conducts the interrogation, or even all members of the Wisengamot participate in the interrogation. Of course, the last situation rarely happens. Looking at the two children who looked a little serious, Wade smiled again and said, Actually, you don't need to be nervous. This is just a reminder. As long as you are careful not to use magic casually, there will be no problem. Then, what happens when you are in danger? Qin Yu didn't know much about this minor restraint law. Hermione also showed concern. She really hadn't thought about this before. After all, her life was quite ordinary and there was no danger at all. According to Article 7 of the Binding Act, when the lives of the wizard himself, other wizards present, or muggles are threatened, magic can be used appropriately, even in front of muggles. Wade explained. That's good. Well, thanks to Mr. Qin and Miss Granger for your cooperation today. Today's follow-up is completed. Wade Brooke stood up and said, You're welcome, Mr. Brooke. Thank you for your hard work. Qin Yu and Hermione also stood up. Then, the young employee of the Ministry of Magic was sent away from Granger's house. After they were sent away, Qin Yu asked Hermione about her previous contact with May. The fact was exactly as he had expected. May not only came to tell Hermione the identity of the wizard, but also enthusiastically explained things about the wizarding world and gave Hermione some books. It seems that she is a very good person. Qin Yu commented. Yeah, May is really nice. Hermione followed. What Qin Yu and Hermione didn't know was that the Ministry of Magic employee named Wade Brooke did not return to the underground of Whitehall in London after leaving Granger's house. Instead, his figure suddenly disappeared at a certain moment. Not long after, appeared in an ancient and luxurious manor in Wiltshire. Soon, he was taken into the study of the manor owner by the house elf here. Wade, how is the investigation going? Asked the blonde middle-aged man sitting behind the desk. Mr. Malfoy, after I checked the archives of the Muggle world, I found that this person named Qin did appear in that Muggle community in the spring of this year. There are no records going back to that time. I still call the Department of Magical Education today. I met the child in person, and what he said is basically consistent with the results of my investigation. This is the record I made, Wade said, handing over the registration form. The blonde middle-aged man, the owner of this manor, Lucius Malfoy, took the page and browsed it quickly. So, everything is normal, right? Malfoy said quietly after pondering for a moment. That's right. Wade replied calmly. Humph, everything is normal again. It seems that our principal really wants everyone to think that he is a normal child, Malfoy said coldly. Although he didn't find any evidence, he knew that everything was normal, and that was the biggest abnormality. I think so, Wade said calmly. Thank you, Wade, Malfoy said softly. It's all what I should do. Wade bowed slightly and said, Qin Yu's Christmas vacation lasts for more than 10 days, but adults' vacation is not so long. After resting for a few days, Mr. and Mrs. Granger started working. The two children were left at home and left to make their own arrangements. After answering some of Hermione's questions about magic learning, the two of them had nothing to do. After all, after being reminded by the Ministry of Magic employee named Wade Brooke, Qin Yu did not dare to let Hermione touch the wand. Casting a simple spell might not be a big problem, but if something big happened, he didn't want the two of them to sit in the dock of the Wisengamot, which might also be called the Appeal Dock. So, this morning, Qin Yu suddenly thought of a place and said to Hermione with a mysterious face, "I will take you to a fun place today. I guarantee you will like it." Where to go? Hermione said blankly. "We'll find out when we get there." Qin Yu gave it a small pass. Then, the two of them walked out of the house, took the subway, tram, and other means of transportation, and came to a small, dilapidated-looking building. On both sides of this building were a large bookstore and a record store. Ordinary muggles passing by turned a blind eye to this building, as if they were blocked from sight. "Yes, this is the Leaky Cauldron. Let's go. Start today's journey to Diagon Alley." Qin Yu said this, took Hermione's hand and walked in. As for the latter, his face had already shown an expression of excitement and anticipation. Dimensional Wall. The update is a bit late. I wasted some time yesterday sorting out the plot behind it. In fact, the more seemingly bland the plot, the more homework the author has to do, otherwise it will be difficult to express the tension of the story. It is hard to say whether this book has tension. And then, I have actually been careful to keep the story. I have a sense of immersion, and I am wondering whether every word in every sentence will affect the reading experience. This may be the source of my pain in writing this book. My writing skills are not good enough, but I still want to be realistic. Finally, if it is convenient for everyone, can you click on the one to generate electricity for love? In this way, the author can get 20 cents, and I can have a good meal. Just for the sake of the meal, everyone laughed. Chapter 52. This dirty bar is still very lively. But Qin Yu always felt that the atmosphere here today was a bit strange. So, he held Hermione's hand without daring to let go, and the two of them walked carefully among the somewhat crowded guests, tables, and chairs. Do you think the Wu Chui party will really make a comeback this time? How many years ago did these people disappear? An older guest said in a worried tone. What a witch party. They now call themselves G.A. Grindelwald's army. The name actually keeps pace with the times. I heard it from an orer from the Magical Congress in North America. These people are causing trouble in Brazil. Quite fierce. A younger, middle-aged wizard said. When he heard the names, Wiccan Party and Grindelwald, Qin Yu had subconsciously slowed down. No way, the amount of information is too much. Hermione took this opportunity to look at the bar curiously. She was very sure that there must be a wizard here. She even vaguely saw a stick-like object that should be a wand in some people's pockets, which made her a little excited. After all, she had not seen many real wizards so far, including Qin Yu, and there were only 5. Oh, including herself, there are 6. Does the Magical Congress of North America want to interfere in the affairs of the Brazilian Ministry of Magic? Oh, just them? I'm afraid it would be good if they could keep their own home. When Grindelwald was in North America, he caused a lot of trouble for them. However, Brazil is really troublesome. GA is developing rapidly. The Brazilian Ministry of Magic has sent people are looking for cooperation and support everywhere, including the Magical Congress of North America. You also know that the current International Federation of Wizards is not very effective and is not reliable at all. You can only find a way on your own. Hopefully, they won't come to Europe. Hey, how could they let Europe go? You two should stop talking about this. Be careful of people from the Ministry of Magic overhearing it. Our Minister Fudge doesn't like hearing this very much. Okay, drink. Another glass of sherry, Tom. I'll have a butterbeer. A few people discussed it for a while, then changed the topic and talked about something else. Qin Yu was not interested in their chat about vampires and werewolves, so he stopped listening. So, he pulled Hermione and continued walking forward. Should we say hello to them? Hermione said quietly. Her eyes looked at the various customers sitting around the bar. Why are you saying hello? Qin Yu was stunned. Shouldn't we get to know each other? Hermione said her thoughts. Well, this thought stopped Qin Yu from turning around for a while. However, thinking that Hermione was seeing so many wizards for the first time, she was probably a little happy to meet the same kind and wanted to blend in. Qin Yu roughly understood her state of mind. In short, she is just a silly girl who has never seen the world. Thinking of this, Qin Yu couldn't help but stretched out his other hand to rub her head and said with a smile, "My little cutie, this is not the right place to make friends. There will be many opportunities in the future." "Yeah, I know." Hermione nodded. She actually felt that her idea seemed a bit too abrupt. "Wow, you are the little Oriental boy that Hagrid brought last time, right? How about your experience at Hogwarts in the past 6 months?" The bar owner noticed Qin Yu and greeted him warmly. "Fortunately, my life is quite fulfilling," Qin Yu replied with a smile. "Haha, school time is always the best. By the way, do you want a drink? I can make you a kind of wine suitable for children. This drink is non-alcoholic." The bar owner asked Qin Hermione promoted. "Well, let's do it next time. We are in a hurry." Qin Yu declined. They really couldn't be out for too long. Mr. and Mrs. Granger would definitely be worried if they came home too late, and he didn't want Hermione to stay in the bar too long. After saying goodbye to the bar owner, Qin Yu pulled Hermione through the bar and headed to the patio where the entrance to Diagon Alley was. However, before he entered the patio, there was a bang in the bar. Qin Yu subconsciously looked back and found that a drunk man had bumped into the table and a young man with a haggard face. Saw Rue dash, the drunkard apologized repeatedly. "Be careful next time," the haggard young man said angrily. Qin Yu felt that this person's pronunciation was a bit strange, not like the accent here in London, nor the common British pronunciation. Then, when the young man saw his things falling on the ground, he hurriedly leaned over to pick them up. When he picked up something, his arm stretched out from the cuff, and the back of his outstretched wrist revealed a floating tattoo pattern. It is a black equilateral triangle, and there is a circle and a vertical line inside the triangle. Because the man moved very quickly, Qin Yu could only catch a glimpse of the pattern, but did not see it clearly. Then, the man squeezed through the crowd, walked into the patio first, and hurriedly left, entering Diagon Alley. After the man left, Qin Yu took Hermione into the small patio. "Where did that person go just now?" Hermione asked curiously, looking at the patio, which was only filled with trash cans and weeds. Due to her blocked vision, Hermione didn't see the opening of the entrance to Diagon Alley just now, and she didn't know how the person disappeared. Qin Yu can naturally pretend to be X completely. Thinking of this, Qin Yu temporarily put aside what he had just seen, took out his wand, and solemnly said to Hermione, "Hermione, watch carefully, I will only demonstrate once." "Huh, demonstrate what? And why only demonstrate it once? When you taught me various things before, didn't you demonstrate it several times?" Hermione said with some confusion. Qin Yu was choked and speechless for a moment. At this moment, he really wanted to block this girl's mouth with something. "Okay, you can demonstrate as many times as you like. Anyway, don't blink, I'm going to start." Qin Yu calmed down and continued. "Yeah." The little girl immediately showed a serious and focused expression. Qin Yu didn't say anything more. He followed the instructions taught by Hagrid in his memory and tapped the specific position on the wall 3 times with the tip of his wand. Immediately afterwards, the bricks he knocked began to move quickly, gradually forming an arched doorway. Hermione's eyes widened with surprise after seeing such a magical scene. "How amazing!" the little girl murmured. Well, this reaction made Qin Yu quite satisfied. Advertisement then. He pulled Hermione through the doorway and onto the cobblestone street. When Hermione looked back, the doorway had closed and turned into a solid wall again. As the two walked further, they saw many wizards appearing on the street, as well as the first shop, a shop selling various crucibles. Hermione happily pulled Qin Yu closer, wanting to see what those crucibles were used for. The crucible is mainly used in potions class, so it's not too late to buy it when school starts, Qin Yu reminded. "Yeah, I know. I just want to take a look and not buy it." Hermione nodded. Then, she walked around the store with great interest, and then left with satisfaction. Then came the wizard robe shop, owl shop, magic pet shop, magic stationery shop, astronomical instrument shop, alchemy workshop, etc. In short, Hermione fully implemented her principle of, "I'll just take a look," wherever she went. Everyone has to go in and take a look, and even if they don't buy, they still enjoy it. At this time, Qin Yu finally realized that women, girls, no matter ancient or modern, Chinese or foreign, and no matter how old they are, seem to have an instinct to love shopping hidden in their genes. Of course, this does not rule out the fact that Hermione was surprised at everything when she came here for the first time. After all, Qin Yu was also full of curiosity about Diagon Alley when he came to Diagon Alley last time. However, Qin Yu has experienced various experiences in Hogwarts, and is no longer as ignorant about the magical world as he was at first. Naturally, he is not too curious about these magic shops and magic items. In this way, Hermione walked around and looked around, and occasionally had the courage to chat with the owner of the store. After shopping for a long time, the two of them arrived at a wizard's pharmacy and walked in together. "Boss, do you still have the acromantula venom and the spider abdominal bristles from last time?" A young wizard with messy hair asked the boss anxiously. "Sorry, sir. The last fluid ounce of acromantula venom has just been bought, and there is still a small packet of spider abdominal bristles," the boss said regretfully. After seeing the disappointed look on the young wizard's face, the boss continued, "We have the venom of the grimmest spider here. It is similar to the venom of the acromantula. Do you want to consider buying this instead?" "Oh, how can the poison of the grimmest spider be compared with the acromantula? Forget it. I can only buy this. Give me 5 ounces. No, let's have half a pint. The quality of the venom is not good, so I have to buy more," the young wizard muttered. Note: 1 pint equals 20 fluid ounces, where pints and fluid ounces are units of volume. "Okay." The boss nodded happily and then asked, "What about the spider belly seedy?" "Come on, a handful. I don't need much," the young wizard replied. After Qin Yu and Hermione came in, they watched the boss doing business with great interest. After the boss handed the venom in a bottle and the spider belly bristles wrapped in tinfoil to the young wizard, and collected a bunch of beautiful gold and silver coins, Qin Yu then stepped forward to say hello and called out the boss's name. "Who are you?" The boss was a little unfamiliar with this little oriental boy. "I'm Qin Yu. We wrote by letter." Qin Yu introduced himself with a smile. "Qin? Are you Qin, the sole agent for products produced in the Forbidden Forest of Hogwarts?" the boss said with some surprise. He didn't expect that the person who had been communicating with him would be such a young child. However, after thinking about it, he was relieved. In the magical world, there are all kinds of bizarre things, and even a 1-year-old child can defeat them. That person, you know who. It is not surprising that the teenage boy in front of him is doing business. I'm just a sole agent for some of the products attached to magical creatures," Qin Yu corrected the boss. Good guy. If he really dares to say that he is an agent for the Forbidden Forest, if Professor Dumbledore finds out, will he be killed in a matter of minutes? Okay, that's a slight exaggeration. Old Dang still loves me, but if Professor McGonagall deducts 100 points, he will definitely not be able to escape. Qin Yu thought to himself. "Oh yes, I made a mistake." The boss obviously understood very well and blinked at Qin Yu several times, with a cunning look like a businessman in his eyes. When he sells things, he can of course occasionally declare this to his customers in a subtle way, but if he openly publicizes it, it will cause unnecessary trouble for him and his suppliers. "So, Mr. Qin, when you come here this time, has the new acromantula venom arrived?" the boss said with anticipation. "Sorry, there are no new products of acromantula venom now. I came here this time to accompany my, sister, to visit Diagon Alley," Qin Yu explained. "So that's it, then you can just browse around, and if you like anything in my store, I'll give you a 20% discount." Although the boss was disappointed, he still said enthusiastically, "Thank you, boss." Qin Yu quickly thanked him. A new customer came to the store, and the boss hurriedly went to entertain him. However, this customer disliked the price of dragon liver and left without looking back. Qin Yu shopped at this wizard drugstore much more carefully than Hermione, paying attention to the quality and price of the items, because this was more or less his job. After understanding the market demand, they could supply these stores. Of course, Hermione would definitely not be bored. She pulled Qin Yu and asked him to introduce all kinds of weird magical herbs. It was like having a lively herbal medicine or potion class. Then, when Qin Yu realized that he didn't recognize most of the things in the back, he decisively took Hermione's little hand and left the store. Time passed quickly, and 2 hours passed before I knew it. Hermione was very happy throughout her trip to Diagon Alley, and her favorite was Flourish and Blott's bookstore, because there were so many books that she had never heard of before, and some of the books could move and even make scary sounds. "This is even more interesting. Qin, can I read here for a while?" Hermione said expectantly. On the second floor of Flourishes and Blott's bookstore, there is a reading area where guests are allowed to read. Qin Yu secretly thought, little ancestor, you finally need to take a rest. So, he immediately nodded in agreement and ordered a glass of Flourish Blossom Bookstore's special flavor juice for each of them. Just like that, the two of them sat down at a table by the window, sipping this juice that tasted different in every bite, and looking through the books they found. Hermione was reading a book called History of the Magical World and Magical Management Organizations in Various Regions, and she read it very seriously. Is this girl too ambitious to read a book like this right from the start? Qin Yu thought to himself. Of course, he was just complaining casually. What he had on hand was a book called Some Weird Ideas on Alchemy, written by a wizard at the Egyptian Alchemy Research Center. However, after reading for a while, Qin Yu found that this person's ideas were indeed weird, and some of them were even nonsense. When he saw in the book that the magic stone could be used to provide magical energy to solve the energy crisis in the human world, Qin Yu was very happy. Is the magic stone just a stone from the street that can be easily broken? This idea is too unrealistic. So, he simply closed the book, took a sip of juice, and then looked out the window to soothe his slightly sore eyes. Outside the window were numerous shops and bustling crowds. Thanks to the soundproofing spell, he didn't feel noisy when he sat here. Instead, he felt like he was appreciating the various aspects of wizard life. Well, you can draw a picture based on this situation and call it Christmas on the streets. Thinking of this, Qin Yu couldn't help but smile. However, this smile did not last long before it slowly disappeared, and his brows furrowed slightly. Is it that person from the bar? Qin Yu thought to himself. Yes, there was a pale young wizard walking hurriedly downstairs. It was the man Qin Yu saw in the leaky cauldron. Thinking of the tattoos he saw before, Qin Yu couldn't help but feel doubts in his heart. Ding, dear host, the seemingly peaceful magical world has been undercurrent. You have inadvertently discovered a suspicious person and have become vigilant. Now, please make your choice. 1. Proceed with caution and inform others of what you discover. Reward 1,000 gold galleons. 2. Take the risk to investigate and obtain certain investigation results. Reward the high-level casting ability of the illusion curse. The sudden appearance of the system made Qin Yu feel that things were not simple. Chapter 53. The illusion spell is a camouflage spell that can make the person or object cast by the spell resemble a chameleon and achieve similar or consistent effects with the surrounding environment, including color and texture. A more advanced disguise charm can also specifically conceal the object being cast according to the needs of the caster, such as removing the wings of the Pegasus, so that muggles will not see the special features of the Pegasus. Wizards who raise flying horses will not be at risk of exposure. As for the high-level illusion spell, it is said that it can achieve the effect of invisibility, which is equivalent to wearing an invisibility cloak. It sounds awesome, but it is indeed difficult to perform. Anyway, Dumbledore can definitely do it. As for Snape's level, it can also produce a certain invisibility effect, but it is definitely not as perfect as Dumbledore's. Qin Yu had practiced this spell under the guidance of Snape, but it was not very successful. He could only manage to make the color similar to the environment. In short, the high-level illusion charm is a very valuable magic spell, which is equivalent to having an extra invisibility cloak. How could Qin Yu not be tempted when the system gave such a reward? You know, if he practiced alone, it would probably take him 2 or 3 years to master it. The system's reward directly shortened this time. Faced with the 2 options presented by the system this time, Qin Yu would have definitely chosen 2 if he had not brought Hermione with him. However, now that Hermione was here, he was a little hesitant. Maybe choosing one is not bad either. Qin Yu secretly thought in his heart. Qin, what's wrong with you? Are you thinking about something? Hermione raised her eyes and accidentally saw the thoughtful expression on Qin Yu's face and asked in confusion. I suddenly thought that I have something to do in Diagon Alley, but it doesn't matter. It's not an emergency. Qin Yu said casually. Well, then just do it. There's nothing to do now anyway. Besides, don't you often say that since some things must be done, there is no need to find reasons to delay them? If you teach me, will you forget it yourself? Hermione said seriously. After hearing her words, Qin Yu was a little stunned for a moment. Yes, there are some things that cannot be avoided, and there is no point in delaying them. As a time traveler, he should actually understand this truth, because he knows how difficult the future will be. Maybe it was the peaceful life that numbed him, making him almost forget that he had to make a lot of efforts to make changes in the future. So, his eyes became firm, and he nodded and said, You are right, some things cannot be avoided, and there is no need to delay them. Yeah. Hermione nodded with a smile, feeling that she had given Qin a big lesson. Then, she asked, Do you need me to follow you? No, just stay here and read. It's more convenient for me to do this alone. Qin Yu shook his head and said. Qin Yu definitely couldn't take Hermione with him to investigate, but it was quite safe for her to stay at Flourish and Blott's bookstore. Yeah, okay. Although Hermione was slightly disappointed, she responded obediently. Then she pointed to the empty cup again, bit her lip, and said with some embarrassment, Qin, Can I have another glass of juice? Of course it's no problem. I'll go to the boss and ask her to bring a drink. Then I'll leave some money with her. Just tell the boss what you want to buy. Qin Yu said with a smile. That's great, thank you, Qin. Hermione said happily. Why are you being polite to me? Qin Yu stood up, gently rubbed Hermione's head, and then walked downstairs quickly. Choose two. Qin Yu thought silently in his heart. Ding. Your choice is full of courage. Please complete the investigation as soon as possible. I wish you good luck, the system replied. After Qin Yu walked downstairs, he looked back at Hermione, who was quietly reading a book by the window. The latter seemed to have noticed his gaze and tilted her head to look at him. Then she showed a bright smile and smiled at him. She waved her hand, indicating that he could do things with peace of mind. Go back quickly and don't worry about her. Well, what a lovely, sensible and considerate old girl. Qin Yu waved goodbye to Hermione again and walked down the stairs. After leaving a pile of gold galleons and asking the boss to give Hermione a glass of strange juice, Qin Yu quickly went out to find the young man. In fact, it didn't take much time from when he found the suspicious man to when he went downstairs. In addition, the man's movement track was relatively clear, so Qin Yu quickly discovered the man's figure. Then, he carefully followed the man, keeping a safe distance. Qin Yu followed him like this for a while, and saw the man walking around in the crowded streets. However, his expression and movements were a little nervous, and he obviously had no intention of buying anything. About 10 minutes later, the man looked at the magic clock in a certain store, his steps began to speed up, and he quickly left the lively and bustling street and walked to the side, becoming more and more secluded as he walked. Finally, at a certain moment, his figure suddenly disappeared for some reason. Qin Yu quickly approached and found that the man had turned into a narrow, deserted alley. Then, the young man stopped in this alley, looking a little anxious, standing there as if waiting for someone. Since the alley was not long and was open at both ends, in order to avoid being discovered by this person or others who might appear, Qin Yu did not guard the entrance of the alley. Instead, he went to a big tree nearby and climbed up to carry out the operation. Squat and guard. Although it is winter at this time, this tree has dense branches and leaves. It must be some special tree species. Qin Yu is hidden in the crown of the tree, making it difficult for outsiders to detect his presence at a glance. Nearly 10 minutes later, while the young man in the alley was pacing impatiently, someone appeared at the opposite alley and obviously walked towards the young man. After Qin Yu saw it, he quickly and carefully slipped out of the tree, then quickly and lightly approached the alley here, and stopped next to a debris pile, using a broken wooden board to cover his figure, and then he carefully the ground looked at the two people not far away through the cracks in the wooden boards. You came too late and have no sense of time at all, the young man said dissatisfied. You insisted on making an appointment here. I was afraid of meeting an acquaintance, so I had to take some detours, the visitor said helplessly. The man who came later was wearing a dark cloak, and his face was covered by the hood of the cloak. Qin Yu couldn't see the man's face clearly, but his voice sounded like that of an adult man in his 30s. You can come here in advance, and it is the safest for both of us to make an appointment here, the young man said impatiently. To be honest, both of us should have more trust, for the greater good, and so do we, the cloaked man said. Forget it, we are different from you. At least, we will not treat our fellow wizards differently because of their bloodline, the young man said with a cold snort. Okay, let's put an end to the dispute over ideas. At least we need to cooperate now, don't we? The cloaked man's tone slowed down. Well, I have no objection to cooperation. Of course, I'm not the one who can decide. The young man stopped tit for tat. Then, the man in the cloak stretched out a hand and handed over a key. Then, let's get down to business. We think the things are okay. This is the second installment of money. The young man took the key and handed over a small bag. The man in the cloak took the bag, opened the rope at the top, looked down, and then said with satisfaction, Okay, happy cooperation? He held out a hand, and the young man shook it reluctantly. Advertisement, however, at this moment, the noise coming from the alley alarmed them. First there was a cat meowing, then there was a cry of pain from someone, and then there was a B***************** G sound like a falling board. Who? What person? The two of them exclaimed at the same time and quickly took out their wands. When they saw a figure appearing at the entrance of the alley, they waved their wands at each other at the same time. However, the two of them were only halfway through chanting the spell, as the other party's spell hit them first. Expelliarmus. Dang. There were two sounds of the wand falling to the ground. This made the two people in the alley look frightened. The other party was not only very strong, but also decisive. At first glance, he was not someone to be trifled with. It's good to talk. The cloaked man begged for mercy. Stupefy. Before the cloaked man could finish speaking, the other party's second wave of spells had already attacked. The cloaked man and the young wizard immediately fainted and fell to the ground. After nearly a minute, the figure at the entrance of the alley slowly approached and cautiously kicked each of the two men on the ground. It seems there's no problem. The voice sounded a little childish. When he removed the camouflage spell from his body, he revealed his face with delicate and elegant features with oriental features. Yes, this person was Qin Yu, who was following and investigating the suspicious man. Fortunately, the place where he was hiding was the home of a stray cat. When the stray cat came home and found an uninvited guest, it immediately attacked him. Qin Yu looked at the two people in the alley intently. Without warning, for bloody streaks were scratched on his hand. He shouted out in pain, and the wooden board in his hand immediately fell to the ground. How could this movement not alert the two people? But Qin Yu simply kept doing nothing, relying on his reaction speed trained by Professor Snape, and cast the two spells of Expelliarmus and Stunner one after another, quickly knocking out the two people in the alley. The restraint law actually focuses on casting spells in front of muggles. In a place like Diagon Alley where wizards only stay, Qin Yu can still cast it boldly. Do you have anything to discuss? What do I have to discuss with you? Qin Yu said coldly. The world is a dangerous place. He needs to kill him first, and he has no intention of chatting with him after taking action. Then, Qin Yu pulled open the sleeves of the two men and saw the pattern of triangles, circles, and vertical lines on the back of the young man's wrist. Yes, this is the legendary Deathly Hallows symbol and Grindelwald symbol. On the inside of another person's wrist, there is a bright red tattoo, which is a pattern of a python emerging from the mouth of a skull. Seeing the second pattern, Qin Yu only felt his scalp was a little numb. Merlin's legs, a Death Eater and a GA. How can we get them all together at once? Qin Yu sighed while picking up the keys and bags from the two people's hands and stuffing them into his arms. He heard faint voices coming from his ears. He didn't know if they were pedestrians passing by. Qin Yu didn't stop too much. He couldn't take the two people on the ground with him anyway. Then, he walked quickly from the alley where he just entered. Got out. Wow, Qin, where did this kitten come from? When Hermione saw the little yellow cat in Qin Yu's arms, her eyes instantly became gentle and infatuated. There is no way. It is difficult for girls to resist the cuteness of small animals. Oh, I picked it up on the road. It seems to be a stray cat. I just cleaned it. I plan to take it to a pet store later, but I don't know if they will accept it, Qin Yu said helplessly. Although the cat attacked him, it had occupied the other person's nest first, and it seemed to have crushed the kitten's toy, a very broken puppet. When he left the alley, the little yellow cat looked at him and shivered, probably realizing that this boy was a very powerful and scary person. Seeing that it was pitiful, Qin Yu threw a cleaning spell at it and brought it back. Can I give him a hug? Hermione said expectantly. Okay, but you have to be careful. My hand was scratched by it just now, Qin Yu reminded. Are you okay? Hermione looked at Qin Yu's hands and said worriedly. It's okay. I've bought special healing potions from the potion shop. Qin Yu showed Hermione the back of his injured hand. After being treated with healing spells and special potions, there are no obvious traces left on him. Hermione felt relieved, and then began to scold the little yellow cat. How could you bully Qin? He is a very kind and gentle person, and you see, he even brought you back. After listening to Hermione's words, the little yellow cat purred in his body. He didn't know if he understood what gentleness and kindness meant. At this time, the two of them were on the first floor of Flourish and Blott's bookstore. Since Qin Yu left some money and let Hermione watch the purchases, she carefully selected a few books and asked the boss to put them into a canvas bag. When Qin Yu came back, the bookstore owner returned the remaining pile of gold galleons to him. Looking at the pile of gold galleons that had not decreased much, Qin Yu secretly thought, this girl is really a person who knows how to live a good life. She even knows how to save money for me. Then, Qin Yu carried the bag containing the books, and Hermione hugged the little yellow cat, and left Flourish and Blott's bookstore together. Why did you buy this book? Qin Yu casually looked at the books in the bag on the way, and said with some surprise, I see that you have been reading this book, and the boss said that this book has been in the store for a long time and no one has bought it. It is on sale. It only costs 5 sickles, so I bought it together. After Hermione said this, she felt a little bit. He said awkwardly, Don't you like this book? No, actually this book is quite good. It has a certain degree of originality. Moreover, 5 Zico is very affordable. We definitely made a profit by buying this book at such a cheap price, Qin Yu said with a smile. Hee, that's good. Hermione also laughed. Chapter 54. Finally, Qin Yu and Hermione returned home with the cat. By the way, they had already put the little yellow cat in the magic pet store. The clerk said that the cat had the blood of the cat and could barely be sold. However, when the two of them came out of the pet store and had not walked a few steps, Hermione muttered, "Crookshanks is obviously very beautiful. Why did the clerk say that he is ugly and not easy to sell?" Who? Qin Yu was stunned when he heard this. Shop clerk, Hermione said blankly. I mean, what kind of mountain is that? Qin Yu continued to ask. Crookshanks. Hermione said her full name. Yes, Crookshanks. Qin Yu nodded. Crookshanks is beautiful, Hermione said solemnly. So, who is Crookshanks? Qin Yu frowned. That kitten we picked up? I just named him. After Hermione said this, she looked back at the pet shop eagerly. Well, Qin Yu didn't know if Hermione had mentioned this name just now. However, Crookshanks fits the image of that cat quite well, too short, slightly curved legs. Note, crook means crooked, and shank means calf. The most important thing is that Qin Yu knows this name. However, he was not sure whether this Crookshanks was Hermione's Crookshanks. At least, with its fluffy yellow fur, big face, and short legs, it did look a bit like Hermione. Of the cat I was going to buy in 3rd grade. If no one wants to buy Crookshanks, will he always be locked in a cage? This is too pitiful, right, Qin? Where is the person? Hermione said after saying this. I suddenly realized that there was no one around. Then, she turned around and saw Qin Yu standing behind with a bag containing books and looking at her helplessly. Why don't you leave? Hermione asked, confused. Are you sure you want to leave? Qin Yu raised his eyebrows and asked. Hermione blinked a few times. Then, an uncontrollable smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Qin, are you? Yes, it's what you think. Really? It's not true. You've already given him a name. He will naturally be our cat. Now that Hermione has named the cat Crookshanks, don't worry about whether Qin Yu knows it. He didn't even intend to leave the cat in the store. That's great. I really love you to death. Moo-ah, Hermione ran over, stood up on tiptoes and gave Qin Yu a pop on the cheek, then immediately ran back to the magic pet shop. Well, it's not surprising that a Western-style kiss is a courtesy, Qin Yu thought to himself. Then, with a slight cough, he slowly returned to the store. The two of them got the cat back smoothly. Qin Yu also bought some pet medicines such as meat enhancers and hair-smoothing agents for cats. The clerk was naturally very happy and did not feel at all that the two children had just put down the cat. It would be too much trouble to go back again. Hermione was the happiest. She hugged the little yellow cat. No, it has a name now. It's called Crookshanks and refused to let go. Crookshanks, you will live with us from now on. I am Mother. My name is Hermione, and this is Father. No, it's Uncle. His name is Qin. Hermione walked on the street. He said to the little yellow cat in his arms. Why am I not the father? Qin Yu asked in confusion. Because I am your sister. You are Crookshanks' uncle. Hermione said seriously. Obviously, she remembered Qin Yu's previous introduction to the owner of the leaky cauldron, saying that she was his sister. Okay, let's just be uncle. Qin Yu felt that there was no need to argue about this topic. In this way, a family of 3, 2 people and a cat, strolled around Diagon Alley for a while, ate some of the special food here, and then ended today's trip and left Diagon Alley. When Qin Yu, Hermione, and Crookshanks returned home, Mr. and Mrs. Granger had not yet gotten off work. Qin, do you think our parents will agree to our raising him? Hermione started to feel a little worried at this time. Don't worry, I will help you convince Uncle David and Aunt Jenny, Qin Yu said with a smile. Great. Crookshanks, did you hear that? Qin will help us, don't worry. Hermione picked up the kitten and said. Qin Yu waited for a moment, but did not wait for a polite kiss. Well, it was just because the cat attracted almost all of Hermione's attention. In the evening, when Mr. and Mrs. Granger came home from get off work, they were indeed worried about raising this cat. They were mainly worried that Hermione would not be able to take care of it, and they were busy with work. Advertisement, however, Qin Yu tried his best to persuade them, saying that they had to bring a pet with them when they went to Hogwarts anyway, and it was okay to buy it half a year in advance. He also said that Crookshanks was a very smart cat, and no one needed to worry too much. He then asked the cat to demonstrate how to squat on the toilet to use the toilet. Of course, the confused and frightened Crookshanks did not successfully complete this action, but almost fell in. However, Mrs. Granger still agreed with her daughter to keep the cat, mainly because she felt that it was not easy for the two children to come up with the idea of letting the cat use the toilet. There was no need to embarrass them too much. Thus, Crookshanks officially became a member of the Granger family, and that night, Hermione took him back to the room to sleep with him. Trig, who had been resting on the window sill of her room, was arranged by Qin Yu to deliver a letter to Hogwarts that night. Lying on the bed, Qin Yu thought about what happened today, without feeling sleepy at all. The topic of discussion among the guests in the Leaky Cauldron was the young wizard he met who was suspected of being a GA, and the cloaked man with a Death Eater tattoo. Also, the keys and bags they exchanged when they met. All this made Qin Yu feel that things were a bit tricky, and he had just confirmed that the key should be Gringotts' vault key, and that the bag contained a sealed transparent glass bottle with a red to black liquid inside. So, is it someone from GA who wants to sell this thing to Death Eaters in exchange for money? Qin Yu boldly guessed. So, what exactly is in this file? Qin Yu once wanted to open it and take a look. However, reason told him that it was better not to seek death, and there was no harm in being more cautious. At this time, Qin Yu increasingly felt that he had made the right choice to take the risk of investigating. If he had stood still and only told others about the suspicious person he saw, he would not have been able to obtain much information, and there would be no one he could trust. Not many, and it was impossible to notify them in time at that time. Therefore, he did what he could do and obtained a lot of investigation results. The rest was left to those who were more suitable than him. Thinking of this, Qin Yu couldn't help but look out the window. I don't know if he had the ability to predict things, but when he looked outside, there was a distortion somewhere outside the window, and an old man with a gray beard suddenly appeared outside. Soon, the window opened automatically and the old man walked in. This old man is Professor Dumbledore, one of the people Qin Yu trusts most at present and the most powerful one. Professor Dumbledore came in a hurry after receiving Trig's notice. Qin, what happened? Dumbledore asked curiously. Qin Yu didn't go into details in the letter, but just asked him to come as soon as possible. Qin Yu originally wanted Trig to fly to Hogwarts with the keys and bag, but for safety reasons, he just informed Dumbledore to come to his place to meet him quickly, so as to ensure nothing went wrong. Well, today I took Hermione to Diagon Alley. Therefore, Qin Yu told Dumbledore exactly what he heard and saw in Diagon Alley. Lao Deng did not interrupt the whole process, but his old face became more and more solemn. When Qin Yu finally handed him the vial in the bag, there was already worry in his eyes. You mean, this is not the first transaction between them, but the second? Dumbledore asked a seemingly unimportant question. Yes, they seem to have met before, are somewhat familiar with each other, and even argued about ideas. Qin Yu replied. Well, I understand, Dumbledore said, putting away the key and vial. Then, he warned Qin Yu, Qin, don't take risks in the future. Leave today's matter to me for further investigation. You can enjoy the last few days of your Christmas vacation. Well, I actually happened to meet them at the right time, and I didn't take the initiative to provoke them, Qin Yu said while touching his nose. Well, your vigilance and courage are very worthy of recognition, but you are still young, so some things should be done by us people. After all, these things are too dangerous, Dumbledore said seriously. Okay, Professor Dumbledore, I will listen to your opinion, Qin Yu said kindly. That's good. I'll leave first, you go to bed early. Dumbledore said goodbye to Qin Yu with a smile. Goodbye, Professor Dumbledore. Lao Deng came and went in a hurry. A phantom disappeared in place. After sending away the things in his hands, Qin Yu finally breathed a sigh of relief. Ding. The host has submitted the investigation results to the key person. The investigation task has been successfully completed and the reward has been distributed. Please check it yourself. The system sounded. Qin Yu didn't expect that the selection task would be completed at this moment. Then, he excitedly verified the reward he had just received, the ability to cast the high-level illusion curse. He chanted the incantation and tapped himself with the wand. After a moment, he found that he could no longer see his body. He seemed to have become a ghost without a body. This effect made him very satisfied. Chapter 55. The law for the reasonable restraint of minor wizards has been continuously improved since its promulgation in 1875. Among them, the introduction of trace silk has become a good assistant to the law of restraint. Zungxi, a detection spell cast on minor wizards under the age of 17, focusing on monitoring their behavior outside of school. However, in the actual implementation of the Restraint Act, underage wizards shall not deliberately use magic in front of muggles, no mages, is the most basic requirement. As for young wizards practicing magic in wizard families, many people passed, or practiced and used privately, or tried out the wand when buying it, etc. Even if the trace is reported, the Ministry of Magic will not send out orders to arrest the person. As long as it is not too blatant or causes serious impact, the best the Ministry of Magic could do was send a warning letter. As for wizards who are not in school or muggle-born wizards, the supervision of the Ministry of Magic is relatively weak. There is no trace of the underworld, and these children will inevitably lose control of their magic without guidance, such as turning the glass in the zoo. If the tree disappears or the tree is knocked down, it will be difficult for the Ministry of Magic to respond in time. It can only obtain information based on intelligence from other channels. In short, as long as you don't act like a monster, the Ministry of Magic won't come looking for you. Note: this is a unified explanation. Don't delve into the restraint act and traces. Look at Harry's behavior from the first part to the last part in the original book. As long as no one is messing with you, the restraint act is it's very flexible. I know that Zhongxi can't get around it, but there are things that Harry can't do and Malfoy can't do. Just think of me as a demon. And Zhongxi is very important, and the protagonist will definitely not do it easily. Be a monster, unless the plot requires it. In view of the above, Qin Yu carefully experimented with the disguise charm, then did not use it too much, and resisted the urge to go downstairs to scare Hermione and Crookshanks. It has to be said that Dumbledore is indeed the person who can completely reassure Qin Yu. After handing the things to Lao Deng, Qin Yu felt much more at ease. It was late at night, and sleepiness gradually came over him. He lay on the bed and soon fell into a deep sleep. In the next few days, Hermione held Crookshanks' little yellow cat in her arms basically every chance she got, and the relationship between one person and one cat quickly grew. And, amazingly, Crookshanks actually learned to use the toilet. This is of course due to Hermione's persistent teaching, but I have to admit that this cat is indeed very smart, which made Qin Yu once wonder if he was transformed by a wizard, that is, in the animagus form. However, Crookshanks never revealed his original form. I've been teaching him to call Mommy recently. Maybe he will have learned it by the time you come back from school, Hermione said with a smile. However, after saying this, she suddenly realized that the Christmas vacation was about to end, and Qin Yu would return to school tomorrow. Thinking of this, the originally happy look in her eyes turned into depression and loneliness. Qin Yu saw this and said when Yin, "I will be back soon, and I will write to you often." Unexpectedly, Hermione pursed her lips and said, "I don't want to just write a letter." After spending 10 days together during the Christmas vacation, Hermione felt that simply writing letters could no longer satisfy her, and it would be better to have Qin by her side. However, Qin will eventually return to school. Thinking of this, Hermione felt very unhappy. Crookshanks in her arms seemed to feel her emotions and rubbed his master's arm with his big furry face. Qin Yu didn't know how to comfort Hermione's mood for a while, because even he himself had some feelings of separation. Then, seeing Crookshanks rubbing Hermione's arm, Qin Yu felt angry for no reason, grabbed the cat by the scruff of the neck, and pushed it aside. "Qin Yu." When Hermione let out an unexpected exclamation, Qin Yu approached and gently held her in his arms. "So, if you don't know how to comfort her, just hug her for a while, as a courtesy." Hermione's body was a little stiff at first, but after smelling the familiar scent of Qin Yu, she gradually relaxed and rubbed her face against his neck. Her originally depressed and resentful mood was relieved. "Then you must write at least 2 letters a week. You can write shorter, but you can't stop writing just because you are busy." The little girl put forward her own, demanding request. "Okay, I promise to write at least 2 letters a week. If I can't do it, you can send Trig to capture me." Qin Yu promised. "How can Trig lead you?" Hermione said with wide eyes. "He also has many brothers and sisters who can help together." Qin Yu said seriously. "Then you might be thrown from the sky by them at any time, haha." Hermione couldn't help laughing after imagining a few owls flying in the sky holding Qin Yu. The girl's depression went away as quickly as it came. After receiving Qin Yu's assurance, especially the hug, Hermione felt much better. He went upstairs and helped Qin Yu pack his luggage. Qin Yu, on the other hand, felt inexplicably warm in his heart when he saw Hermione kneeling beside the bed, a little unfamiliar but helping him fold clothes in a serious manner. Being able to enjoy the treatment of the future Minister of Magic, personally sorting out his clothes made him quite emotional. "Qin, please quickly pack your things and see what you need to bring and what you don't need to bring." Hermione saw Qin Yu standing stupidly and warned him solemnly. "I want to take you with me." Qin Yu said casually while packing his things. Is it really possible? Hermione's eyes lit up with an expectant look. Okay, this girl is acting weird. Oh, unless you become an owl or a cat, Qin Yu said angrily. Then I will change now. I am already a cat. Meow, Hermione said this, climbed onto Qin Yu's bed, and disguised herself as a kitten. Qin Yu reached out and stroked her head, matching her performance. Of course, Hermione's acting skills were only enough to fool Qin Yu. She was still far from turning into a real kitten. Naturally, she couldn't really be taken to Hogwarts by Qin Yu. The only impact she had was that she messed up the clothes she had just folded. So, after playing around for a while, Hermione continued to squat by the bed and help Qin Yu fold the clothes again. On the next day, Qin Yu had eaten early, packed his luggage, and was ready to leave. The Grangers originally planned to take Qin Yu to the train station, but Qin Yu felt that he could do it alone and did not want to delay their work, so he declined their offer. Then he said goodbye to the Grangers at the door. Crookshanks, goodbye, Uncle. Hermione held the little yellow cat in her arms, grabbed one of his paws, and waved goodbye to Qin Yu. Hermione's performance at this time surprised the Grangers, because they originally thought their daughter was going to cry again, but they didn't expect her daughter to be so calm and behave so naughty today. As everyone knows, Hermione had already been depressed as early as yesterday and was coaxed out of it. Although she was reluctant to let go, she didn't indulge in it too much. The little girl is also becoming stronger little by little. Qin Yu left Granger's house, took the bus and subway, went to King's Cross Station, and entered the Hogwarts Express platform at the 9 3/4 station. Then, he took the train again and returned to the Magic School. The vacation is over and the new semester is about to begin. Dimensional wall. First of all, regarding the use of magic outside school, for the sake of the plot, let's refer to the explanation at the beginning of this chapter for the time being. Then, the new semester will not be too long and will go very quickly. Chapter 56. Familiar mountains, familiar water, familiar classrooms, campuses, dormitories, auditoriums, and Professor Snape's long legs. If you don't wake up from the laziness and waste of the holidays, I don't mind throwing you into the Black Lake to wake up. Listen to this cold voice. Listen to this mean tone. It's such an instant refreshment. Mr. Qin, I see that you are in a good mood. So let me demonstrate the grinding of the weasel's dried gland cysts. Professor Snape picked up Qin Yu and said slowly. After Qin Yu heard this, his face fell instantly. Weasel gland sack, are you going to take me away? If you do well, I will consider adding 1 point to Gryffindor. Professor Snape then said calmly. Okay, you're welcome. My pleasure, Professor Snape. Qin Yu smiled brightly. Then he resolutely walked to the lecture table and experimental bench in front of the classroom, took a deep breath, picked up a shriveled, gray, and dried animal organ with tweezers, and threw it into the mortar. This gray thing is the weasel gland sac. Qin Yu has seen it in textbooks. He knows that despite its ordinary appearance, this thing has a very light taste, but once it is ground into powder, it will be something serious. After gathering up the courage, Qin Yu suddenly smashed the weasel's gland sac with the pestle in his hand, and then pressed hard to grind the fragments. And as he grinded, a stench that was so strong that it couldn't be dispelled quickly spread in the classroom.
Ugh, ouch, it stinks.
I'm dying. Help. I'm in tears. The students in the classroom were all retching from the stench and calling for help. Qin Yu was the first to bear the brunt and was on the verge of death at any time. Remember this smell, Professor Snape said slowly and loudly. There was no way. The classroom was so noisy at the moment, and even if he didn't speak loudly, the students wouldn't hear him. Remember, Professor, please let us go. Professor Snape, we really remember it. The taste is so profound. I will remember it forever. I can never forget this smell in my dreams. The classmates replied one after another. Snape brand high suction range hood. Ah, Professor Snape waved his magic wand, and the odor in the air was instantly taken away. Then, he restrained the stench of the weasel glands below Qin Yu's chest so that no one could smell it. Qin Yu saw this understatement and once again admired Snape's magical attainments in his heart and decided to learn it. In this way, if he cooked food in the dormitory, he would not have to worry about being discovered by the prefects. Thinking about these, Qin Yu finally completed the grinding work and passed the weasel gland cyst powder through a fine sieve. Okay, it's quite qualified. Professor Snape looked at the fine powder he finally got and nodded. Then, Qin Yu blinked a few times as a reminder. Gryffindor, 1 point. Professor Snape said in a calm tone. The Gryffindor students cheered instantly, And the Slytherin students who were in class at the same time were also very convinced. This guy Qin had earned it with his life, so they couldn't accept it. Weasel's glandular sac powder has a very stinky smell, but it is of great use. The insect repellent and animal repellent made from it can provide you with a certain degree of safety in the wild. Next, I will demonstrate the specific method of making this potion. Professor Snape began the formal lecture. At the end of the class, the first-grade children lost their appetite again. The lethality of the weasel gland sacs had exceeded the previous bloody and terrifying images of Professor Swinton. Professor Snape's notoriety quickly overwhelmed Professor Swinton. Seriously, I teach diligently. Why do I have a bad reputation? Professor Swinton said rather dissatisfied. At this time, he, Qin Yu, and Professor Snape were waiting in the defense against the dark arts teacher's office. This is the first time the three have been together since late last year. The reason is that Professor Swinton has been busy with something and has no time to find them. Hey, how do you feel good about yourself? Qin Yu said angrily. Qin, you are my most beloved student. Why do you say that to me? I am really sad. Professor Swinton looked sad. Okay, Stephen, tell us what brought us here today. Professor Snape finally couldn't help but interjected. When Professor Swinton heard this, he immediately put away his funny expression and became serious. He didn't speak immediately, but took out a vial, which contained half a bottle of red to black liquid. What is this? Snape frowned. Qin Yu showed a solemn expression. Yes, he knew this thing. He picked it up from a suspicious person in Diagon Alley during the Christmas holidays. It seems that Qin still remembers this thing. Professor Swinton looked at Qin Yu and said, Well, I remember, but why did Professor Dumbledore give it to you? Qin Yu asked curiously. Leave it to me, of course, because this is more or less my expertise. Professor Swinton shrugged. What's your specialty? Qin Yu thought about Professor Swinton's unique skills. It's alchemy. Swinton didn't give Qin Yu much time to guess and told the answer himself. Is this thing related to alchemy? Qin Yu became more and more curious. That's right. Would you like to explain to me what's going on first? Professor Snape interrupted them. Let Qin speak. Professor Swinton pointed at Qin Yu. So, Qin Yu recounted what he had experienced in Diagon Alley. After listening to his story, Professor Snape said calmly, the action was quite decisive. Professor Dumbledore is investigating this matter himself. He just asked me to study the composition and function of this liquid. This time, after the research has produced results, he asked me to communicate with you. Professor Swinton added. So, what is this? Qin Yu asked. A product of life alchemy. I guess it comes from the dark alchemy of the North American witch god cult, and its function, Professor Swinton said, opening something covered by a black cloth next to it. It was an iron cage, and inside the cage was a white mouse that looked dull. There were many wounds on the white mouse's body, some of which looked even fatal. Immortality? Professor Snape said this term that made him a little disgusted. That's right. It means immortality. Professor Swinton nodded. What is immortality? Qin Yu asked doubtfully. The immortal body means that although the body will die and be injured, it can still move. Professor Swinton explained briefly. After listening to his words and looking at the mouse again, Qin Yu instantly understood what was going on. Isn't this a zombie? Could this black liquid make animals or people immortal? Qin Yu said, slightly shocked. Yes, but it should be much more than this one effect. Professor Swinton said in rather cautious language. His words instantly silenced the room. After a while, he waved his wand and pointed it at the mouse. After a ray of white light, black smoke began to appear on the mouse, and it soon burned to ashes. It's long dead, Professor Swinton said calmly. Then, he continued, things seem to be a little tricky. So what Professor Dumbledore means is that we need to continue to train Qin so that he can have more coping abilities. After all, various things will always happen around him. Accident. I don't want any accidents, okay? Qin Yu thought to himself. Well, I have this idea. Professor Snape nodded. Oh, then I thank you and Professor Dumbledore. Qin Yu rolled his eyes and said. In this way, Qin Yu's after-school tutoring, which he thought would come to an end, became more and more severe. Professor Snape once even forced Qin Yu to the point where he almost used the power of Obscurus, frantically testing the limits of his abilities. Of course, most of the time, he still didn't train to the point of death. Classes, after-school tutoring, Quidditch practice, and the occasional trip to Hagrid Hut. Qin Yu's life at Hogwarts quickly returned to its previous state and became even busier. While he was busy, He kept his promise to a certain little girl and wrote and sent her at least 2 letters every week. The letter that the little girl named Hermione replied was very different from the past. At least, she would directly write the words, "I miss you very much" in the letter, instead of writing just occasionally like in the past. "We'll miss you," or simply "Miss Trigg." The short 10-day vacation seemed to have changed her a lot. Feeling the changes in Hermione's writing style, Qin Yu's time at Hogwarts also continued to fly by. The cold winter is gradually passing. The ice and snow are melting, and spring is coming. Chapter 57. Spring is blooming and everything is reviving. The little wizards, taking off their thick winter coats, begin to have fun in the rest areas of their respective colleges, on the stairs and corridors everywhere, in the wide campus, and in the open fields, releasing the passion of young people. Vitality. Even Elvis, who had always been dull, started competing with Jimmy in flying lessons. Since he got used to the position of sitting on a broomstick with his but on the handle, and his flying skills have improved, Qin Yu even thought that he might be able to become a Quidditch goalkeeper given time. The Slytherin students who took flying lessons with them, especially Jerome, did not dare to cause any more trouble. After all, the last scene of Qin Yu holding a wooden stick in the sky torturing him he could still remember it so vividly that every time he thought about what happened that day, his butt still hurt a little. Qin Yu. It's a wooden sword, not a stick. And facing Qin Yu, who was killing everyone on the Quidditch field, Jerome had already been convinced and couldn't beat him. He was not so good as others, so he had to admit it. Of course, Qin Yu didn't have much sense of accomplishment in making a little brat give in, and he didn't have much to care about. After all, if he didn't obey, he would probably beat him again. Others were practicing flying, while Qin Yu was riding a broomstick in the sky and slowly looking at the scenery. Spring is in full bloom, and the mountains are dyed green. At this time, the scenery around Hogwarts has a different charm. I don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but during this flying lesson, Qin Yu saw Lucius Malfoy with shiny blonde hair, and the house elf Dobby following him. But this time, Lucius, an old boy, stopped beside the lawn dedicated to flying lessons, raised his proud head, and looked at Qin Yu in the sky with a smile in his eyes. "Huh, this old boy is definitely trying to mess with me." Qin Yu instinctively said this in his heart. Beside Lucius was Professor Minerva McGonagall, the vice principal of Hogwarts and head of Gryffindor House. At this time, Professor McGonagall, who was wearing an emerald green robe, greeted Qin Yu in the sky with a somewhat solemn expression. "Qin, I have something to talk to you about." Professor McGonagall had already communicated with the flying class teacher, Mrs. Hooch, so there was no surprise to Mrs. Hooch. So, Qin Yu pressed the broomstick and slowly flew down from the sky. "Good morning, Professor McGonagall." "Good morning, Mr. Malfoy." Qin Yu greeted obediently. "Good morning, Qin." Lucius Malfoy nodded. "Professor McGonagall, I wonder what you want to see me for?" Qin Yu asked curiously. "Qin, it's like this," Professor McGonagall said with a rather solemn expression. "I have something to ask you, Mr. Qin," Lucius Malfoy said first. "Oh, is there anything you need me to answer, Mr. Malfoy? Is it still what happened in the Forbidden Forest last year?" Qin Yu asked blankly. "It's not just what happened that day." Lucius said nothing more. "Is there something else going on?" Qin Yu felt a sudden surprise when he heard this. "Qin, let's go to Professor Dumbledore's office to discuss this matter." Professor McGonagall interrupted. "Well, okay, Professor McGonagall." Of course Qin Yu wanted it. With Lao Ding around and everything, he would feel at ease. So, Qin Yu followed them to the principal's office. Along the way, Qin Yu deliberately slowed down and did not follow too closely, because the elf Dobby kept giving him an anxious look. After Qin Yu put some distance away from Lucius and Professor McGonagall in front of him, the elf Dobby deliberately slowed down and approached him. Then, Dobby opened his mouth and said one word to Qin Yu in a very soft voice. Qin Yu didn't hear clearly at first, but Dobby raised his volume again and repeated, "Spit the real potion?" Qin Yu. After hearing what Dobby said clearly, Qin Yu's scalp immediately became numb. "Paralysis? Can't you avoid it?" Lucius wanted to use this thing for Qin Yu last time, but Snape interrupted him and fooled him. But this time he was obviously determined to use Veritaserum. Thinking of this, Qin Yu felt like 10,000 divine beasts were roaring past him. What he wanted to do most now was to apply oil on his soles and leave quickly. However, reason told him that escaping was useless. "Mr. Qin, please hurry up," Lucius urged from the front, and then he roared in a low voice, "Dobby, what are you doing? Why don't you catch up?" "Okay, Master." Dobby is following. Dobby trotted to catch up with Lucius, trembling, and followed closely beside him. Qin Yu sighed and followed with a complicated expression. He now only hopes that old Deng can help him, or that Professor Snape can do something with the Veritaserum. Otherwise, he may not be treated how he will be treated if he reveals that there is an Obscurus in his body. Will he be captured and used as a guinea pig for research? Thinking of this, Qin Yu's mind inexplicably came to the scene of the zombie white mouse that Professor Swinton showed him and Snape some time ago. In the end, the mouse was burned to a pile of ashes by Professor Swinton. That mouse is so miserable. With these thoughts in mind, Qin Yu followed them and read the entry order and stepped into Dumbledore's office. Professor Dumbledore was busy writing something. Lucius, I'm very sorry. I happened to be busy with something, so I couldn't pick you up. Professor Dumbledore put down the quill in his hand and said to Lucius Malfoy, It's okay, Professor Dumbledore. It's not a big deal for me to come today. I'm just verifying the information of a student at Hogwarts according to the requirements of the school board. Lucius was obviously in a good mood, and his tone was bright when he spoke. He doesn't seem as arrogant as before. Of course, this student refers to Qin Yu. Well, I roughly know your purpose from the letter, and we will fully cooperate. Professor Dumbledore stood up and said. Then, he led several people to sit down in the reception area next to them. And without others noticing, he gave Qin Yu a kind look. Qin Yu felt relieved after seeing it. That's right, Professor Dumbledore. Based on the intelligence we collected from the Muggle world, we discovered that there were several serious leaks of wizard information in the Muggle world last year. For example, someone in the reptile house at the London Zoo, a little boy was witnessed communicating with a python, and someone saw a huge willow tree being uprooted next to a Muggle community. We have reason to suspect that the people involved in these incidents, that is Hogwarts student Qin, Lucius said bluntly as soon as he sat down. At the end of the sentence, Lucius looked sharply at Qin Yu, who naturally showed a panicked expression. Qin Yu hesitated. Lucius, I think these things are not too bizarre. After all, it is very common for young wizards to lose control of their magic, Professor Dumbledore said calmly. However, I feel that the danger level of these incidents has not received enough attention, especially the incident in the Forbidden Forest last year. There are still many doubts about what happened, Lucius said in a cold tone. Oh, I think I have already investigated the matter in the Forbidden Forest very clearly, Dumbledore said calmly. I'm afraid there are some things missing, Lucius said. So, what are you going to do? Dumbledore said calmly. I think our client, Mr. Qin, should give a detailed explanation of the matter. Lucius looked at Qin Yu again. Yes, Mr. Malfoy. Qin Yu stuttered. When he said this, he looked nervously at Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall, acting like a confused and flustered ordinary student. Very good, Mr. Qin. Lucius nodded with satisfaction, then took out a small bottle and said to Dumbledore, Professor Dumbledore, can I borrow the tea you have here? Seeing this, Qin Yu lamented in his heart. Lucius, this old boy, was so incredible that he even brought Veritaserum with him. He just wanted Snape to help, but Snape couldn't help either. This was probably the reason why Dobby just took the risk to remind him. Of course, this reminder was of little use because he didn't have time to respond at all. Well, you can't blame Dobby for this. I guess Dobby had no chance to inform Qin Yu in advance. Okay, Lucius. Dumbledore waved his wand and poured a cup of tea in front of Lucius. After carefully examining the cup of tea, Lucius opened the vial and dropped 3 drops of colorless and odorless liquid into the cup. Looking at the glass of water pushed in front of him by Lucius, Qin Yu's palms started to sweat. What should I do? Does Lauding have any backup plans? If I expose the power of Obscurus, I will definitely become a dangerous person, and it is impossible to stay in the school. The most important thing is, if I drink the truth serum, will I tell everything about the system and my life experience? Damn, where's the system at this time? Shouldn't there be 2 options for me to choose from? Surrender or run? For a moment, the thoughts in Qin Yu's mind were really overwhelming. However, he can't show it on his face, which is a test of one's acting skills. However, just as his hand couldn't restrain its trembling and approached the handle of the cup, a long-lost familiar voice sounded in his mind. Fine, just 2 words. Qin Yu was so moved that he almost shed tears. Dimensional wall. I'm really sleepy and my head hurts. Let's break a chapter here. I have something to do during the day tomorrow. If I get home early, there should be another chapter. Thank you Sunan ZH for sending me 2 big swords. I am flattered. Thank you to every reader for your gifts, reminders, and comments. Your support is the driving force for me to move forward. Well, The author really spends several hours every day thinking about the plot and coding. I hope everyone can click on the ad and get a free gift, which only takes a few dozen seconds, so that the author can continue. In fact, more than one friend has persuaded me to open a new book. However, this book is very meaningful to me, and I really don't want to give up prematurely. Of course, even if I open a new book, I will continue to write this one. Then, this book is read by 10,000 bookshelves every day. Even if hundreds of people give free gifts, there are only more than 100 people now. The author can persevere. The young author would like to thank everyone here. You can read more daily new novels on. Both sites share the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again. Chapter 58. Real or false? Qin Yu asked in his mind. As for my affairs, their abilities cannot be ascertained. The system explained in a short and clear sentence. They? Including everyone present? These words may seem ordinary, but they reveal the system's strong confidence. Brother Tongzi is so domineering. Qin Yu gave a thumbs up in his heart. With the guarantee of the system, he instantly felt confident. Yes, this is a system. If others can detect her existence casually, is that too weak? So, even if he uses legilimency, his memories about the system and being a time traveler will not be seen, right? Qin Yu suddenly thought of this. Well, no. The system responded. Okay, I understand. Qin Yu completed the communication with the system calmly, still acting like a panicked little boy. After all, any normal child will feel fear before drinking suspicious liquid. It's okay, Mr. Qin. This potion will do no harm to you. You will even feel relaxed after drinking it. Lucius Malfoy said in a persuasive way. Are you lying? It's not harmful. Then try 2 bites. Qin Yu couldn't help complaining in his heart. Even though he has only taken potions classes for more than half a year, he still knows that any medicine that acts on the human spirit or brain is not harmful at all. However, the matter has come to this, and it cannot be avoided. Moreover, drinking it now is the simplest solution. Qin Yu held the handle of the cup with trembling hands, and the cup tremblingly hit the porcelain saucer and cup holder, making a soft clang. The sound was particularly clear in the quiet room. This made Lucius smile with satisfaction, and also made Professor McGonagall present, whose expression became more solemn. Principal Dumbledore, on the other hand, was very calm. Of course, Lucius didn't just pay attention to Qin Yu, a little boy from the East. On the contrary, he only used 3/3 of his attention to look at Qin Yu, and the remaining 7/10 were always paying attention to Dumbledore and what Dumbledore had on hand. That quaint magic wand. He was on guard against Dumbledore's sudden attack. Fortunately, until the little boy drank the tea with Veritaserum, Dumbledore never touched his wand. This made Lucius feel relieved. Qin, let me ask you, what happened on that day in the Forbidden Forest? Lucius asked directly without wasting time. Forbidden Forest? On the day of the Forbidden Forest. Qin Yu's eyes were a little blurred and he muttered. Yes, what did you experience in the Acromantula cave in the Forbidden Forest? Lucius guided the question. What he didn't know was that, somewhere beyond the reach of his sight, 2 old and slender fingers made a slight move, and a white arc of light appeared between the 2 fingers, vaguely implying that they were ready to go. That day, I want to thank Professor Dumbledore. Professor Dumbledore saved me. Qin Yu thought for a long time before saying this. His words made Lucius stunned and his brows furrowed. Obviously, this was not the answer he wanted. The slender fingers hidden under the table also closed gently, and the white arc of light converged. Tell me about your experience. What did you go through before Professor Dumbledore arrived? Lucius' tone became obviously irritable. Me? I was very scared that day. I was surrounded by a group of big spiders with 8 eyes. At this time, thanks to Professor Dumbledore, I arrived. Thank you, Professor Dumbledore. Qin Yu said at the end, sincerely thanking Professor Dumbledore. You're welcome. It is my duty as the principal to protect the safety of every student, Dumbledore said in a warm voice. Seeing the 2 people in front of him being polite, Lucius began to breathe heavily in his nose. Then, he asked with some annoyance, I'm asking you, didn't you do anything before Dumbledore arrived? For example, what special abilities did you use? This question was very explicit, and it also revealed Lucius's final suspicion of Qin Yu. He suspected that this little boy had hidden extremely dangerous abilities. However, Qin Yu still said in confusion, what can I do? Oh, I should be trying to control the urge to pee. I was really scared at the time. After saying this, he still looked shy and coy, looking a little embarrassed. Professor McGonagall on the side almost didn't laugh out loud. Fortunately, she stopped laughing at the critical moment, and her face returned to its previous serious expression. However, there was an anxious and worried look in her eyes. Has disappeared. Lucius' temper was already on the verge of exploding, and he didn't even notice Professor McGonagall's brief reaction. Dumbledore, on the other hand, shook his head insignificantly. He really had nothing to say to Qin. So, what about that time at the zoo last year? Lucius tried his best to calm down and change the question. That time? I just scared the snake, and then it left on its own. I don't know what happened. Qin Yu murmured. Did you pull out that big willow tree? How could you have that ability at such a young age? Lucius continued to ask. Maybe it was because the wind was stronger that day. Qin Yu didn't know how to explain it, but he knew that pulling up a tree shouldn't be too bizarre. Lucius, some children do experience unconventional, out-of-control phenomena. However, this phenomenon will disappear during the subsequent magic learning process. Qin is a good example. On this point, you can ask the professors and students. Please find out. Dumbledore interrupted at the right time. He finally understood that what Lucius mentioned about uprooting trees today was just to find a reason for Qin to drink Veritaserum so that he could find out other secrets about Qin. And Dumbledore himself was actually ready to take action at any time. Just because he left his wand, it didn't mean that he couldn't perform magic. Who knew that Qin, a kid, could still talk nonsense after drinking the truth serum? Well, he was calm and composed and didn't miss the mark. Could it be that Lucius Malfoy's Veritaserum was fake? This thought flashed through Dumbledore's mind. However, he immediately denied it because he didn't think Lucius would bring an unconfirmed magic potion when he came all the way here. Since there is no problem with Veritaserum, then the only problem is the person who drank it. Thinking of this, Dumbledore took a deep look at Qin Yu, who was still playing the role of a confused and ignorant little boy. This child is always full of surprises. Professor Dumbledore, the greatest wizard in the world, said with emotion in his heart. Do you have anything to hide? For example, your abilities and your life experience. Lucius asked more and more straightforward questions. Yes, some. Say it quickly. I actually sold the herbs I got from Professor Sprout, but I sold them for a good price and didn't bury them. Herbs? I'm not asking about herbs. Seeing that Lucius had become a little bit hysterical, Dumbledore said in a majestic voice, Mr. Malfoy, I think the matter is very clear. There is nothing wrong with the child Qin. I think the inquiry can end here. He must have something he didn't say. Lucius said reluctantly. I'm sorry. I think Qin has answered all your questions very honestly. If you continue to embarrass a poor child like this, I will report this matter to the school directors. I don't even mind stating it to the Ministry of Magic. What an extreme act you have taken on this matter. Professor Dumbledore continued. You. Lucius glared at Dumbledore. However, he was quickly defeated because he really couldn't beat the opponent. Okay, I'm done asking. After saying this, he stood up angrily, took Dobby the house elf, and left Hogwarts angrily. Minerva, take care of him, Dumbledore said, looking at Qin Yu, who was sleeping. I will, Professor Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall replied. Just when Professor McGonagall was thinking about how to take Qin Yu to the school doctor to recuperate, Snape walked in hastily. He was just giving a potion class to the senior students. After hearing the news that Lucius was coming to school, he hurried over. So Professor Dumbledore briefly explained to Snape what had just happened. Well, I'll take him to rest. After Snape said this, he leaned over and gently picked up Qin Yu, who was sleeping soundly. Then, with long legs, he slowly left the principal's office and went to the school's infirmary to ask Madame Pomfrey to check on Qin Yu's condition. You can read more daily new novels on. Both sites share the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again. Chapter 59. Lucius Malfoy, after leaving Hogwarts, did not immediately return to his home in Wiltshire, but came to a dilapidated manor alone. Failed again? Didn't you say that you would definitely find out about Dumbledore this time? Next to the collapsed gate of the manor, a man wearing a mask and covered in a black cloak stood there, saying in a deep voice said, I can guarantee that there is something wrong with that child. Lucius's voice was still full of anger, and he was also wearing a mask at this time. But what? The man in the cloak and mask said mockingly. I don't know what went wrong. Maybe the Veritaserum has failed. Maybe Dumbledore did something secretly to make the child's answer appear normal. After saying this, Lou Hughes said angrily, Damn normal. I think it's because you're not doing your job well. The man in the cloak and mask said coldly. What qualifications do you have to accuse me? What are you doing during this time? Lucius said, dissatisfied. Of course I am fully preparing to welcome the return of the master, the man in the cloak and mask said in a pious tone. Oh, when the master comes back, he should reward you for your loyalty, Lucius said in a sinister tone. Lucius has always been hesitant about the return of the master. However, he is happy to use the power of those believers. You, on the other hand, claimed time and time again that you had found an opportunity to overthrow Dumbledore, but failed again and again. Do you know how far Dumbledore's ambitions have grown in recent times? He contacted his colleagues in Europe and North America. Students, what are you secretly connecting us with? Our great cause has suffered an unprecedented threat. The man in the cloak and mask said angrily and bitterly. Of course I understand Dumbledore's ambition, but what can I do? He is the principal of Hogwarts, and for decades, his students have been all over the world, Lucius said helplessly. No matter what, we cannot let him ruin the master's return plan. The last blood transaction of the witch god should not have been left to that boy casually. Now we in G.A., Grindelwald's army, have already formed a conflict misunderstanding. It will be difficult to have another chance to cooperate in a short time, the man in the cloak and mask said with great regret. Oh, you are not cowardly and worried about being plotted by G.A., so you arranged a small role to trade? Lucius finally caught the opportunity to mock the other party. What's the use of talking about this now? Since we can't get the witch god's blood over there, we can only find ways to find such things. The man in the cloak and mask also said helplessly. That's Flamel's thing. Have you ever thought about how difficult it is to get it? Lucius said quietly. So what about Flamel? He's just an old man with all the bones in his body broken, the man in the cloak and mask said with disdain. Well, I wish you good luck. After Lucius said this, he reluctantly added, if you need my help, remember to ask me. Wherever I can use you, I will naturally look for you. The man in the cloak and mask said calmly. That's all. It's time for me to go back. Lucius said. Well, bye. Goodbye. When the two of them said this, they ended today's conversation and each used apparition to disappear. After they left, the cold wind blew by, making the dilapidated manor look even more desolate and lonely. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Headmaster's Office. Principal Albus Dumbledore stood in this circular room, his old face showing unconcealable exhaustion. He looked at the phoenix fox squatting there, and inexplicably remembered an ancient poem he saw in the East not long ago. The meaning of that poem was, people who know me well will think that I am full of worries, but those who do not understand me will think that I am full of worries. People will think that what I do has ulterior motives. Yes, since the envoy from the Brazilian Ministry of Magic came to London and informed them that a force calling itself GA was active in the American continent, Dumbledore began to be busy in private. He investigated all information and intelligence about this group of people through his students and friends, and his behavior may be regarded by many people as having ulterior motives. After all, the reputation of Dumbledore, coupled with his students and friends in various positions around the world, if combined in series, is indeed a power that is feared by others. And he always maintains his restraint because he is well aware of the temptation brought by this power. If a person, or a group of people, is too strong, they will easily lose themselves. This is something he understood when he was still young. And the person who taught him this truth was his closest relative. Her death taught him this truth. However, there are some things he must do to save more people from a tragic fate. I just hope that what I do will have a good result, Dumbledore thought to himself. When Qin Yu woke up from a strange dream, his brain was still a little confused. Then, he saw Professor Swinton sitting by the bed, reading a book with great interest. And the name of that book is Some Weird Thoughts on Alchemy. Seeing the title of the book, Qin Yu's thoughts gradually began to focus. He remembered that he had read this book on the second floor of Flourish and Blott's bookstore in Diagon Alley. At that time, he felt that some parts of the book were ridiculous. Later, Hermione bought it along with several other books. Then, when he returned to school, this girl very thoughtfully helped him stuff it into his suitcase. Later, when he arrived at school, he would occasionally take out this book and read it to relieve his boredom. Not long ago, Professor Swinton saw it and borrowed it. Huh, you're awake. Qin Yu woke up for a while before Professor Swinton noticed him. Professor Swinton, what's wrong with me? Qin Yu asked, still confused. You drank the Veritaserum that Lucius brought, and the side effect was drowsiness. You have been sleeping here for more than 8 hours, Professor Swinton explained. Well, it seems that's indeed what happened. Qin Yu thought of this. It seemed that although the system had protected his memory to a certain extent, The side effects of the truth serum could not be offset. Fortunately, it was just drowsiness, and there were no serious consequences. Actually, it was Professor Snape who was here just now, and it was he who sent you here. Professor Swinton raised his eyebrows and said, "Well, I will find an opportunity to thank Professor Snape," Qin Yu said solemnly. "Okay, if you feel that you are almost recovered, you can leave here. In order to avoid worrying your friends, we did not tell them about this matter. You also know that there are some things that the fewer people know, the better." "Okay," Professor Swinton said as he stood up. Qin Yu had indeed slept enough. With the help of Professor Swinton, he got off the bed. When his feet hit the ground, he felt that he was completely awake. The side effects caused by the truth serum are now over. So, the two of them left here together. It was already evening. Walking in the brightly lit corridor, Qin Yu and Professor Swinton chatted one after another, just like they had done many times before. Then, they naturally talked about alchemy. "This book is good. Although the ideas are a bit whimsical, it is very useful for reference. I want to find an opportunity to have a good communication with the author." Professor Swinton raised the book in his hand and said, "Really? I thought you would say this author is crazy and ridiculous," Qin Yu said with a shrug. "Ha ha ha, among the great alchemists in history, which one is not crazy and ridiculous?" Professor Swinton said with a smile. "It seems there is some truth, just like the Eastern proverb. If you are not crazy, you will not succeed." Qin Yu translated the sentence, "If you are not crazy, you will not survive." "Well, it seems that human wisdom is similar." Swinton smacked what Qin Yu said and found it very interesting. Then, he suddenly changed the subject and said to Qin Yu, "I heard that you made the alchemy material from last time into a sword that has no use other than being beautiful? Huh, are you so mean? Otherwise, I would have thought you were Professor Snape." Qin Yu lost his temper. "Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that Qin, who is not afraid of anything, would be embarrassed sometimes." Professor Swinton joked with a smile. "Well, it's true that my abilities are limited and I wasted such precious alchemy materials. How about this? I'll give you the stuff, and you can come up with something more useful." Qin Yu simply refused. Who would have thought that after hearing this, Professor Swinton nodded and said, "I was just trying to get it from you." Qin Yu pouted. "Do you really want it?" However, Professor Swinton immediately said, "This book gave me a lot of inspiration. I will help you make that beautiful sword into a useful sword. What do you think?" "Really?" Qin Yu's eyes lit up when he heard this. "Of course." Professor Swinton nodded. "Can it fly?" Qin Yu asked impatiently. "It's not impossible. It seems that Mrs. Hooch is right. You have always been thinking about flying in the sky riding a sword." Swinton couldn't help but smile. "Professor Swinton, I must correct you. It's not flying on a horse, but on a foot. Aren't you afraid of getting your butt cut while flying with a sword?" Mrs. Hooch's imagination is a bit too big. Qin Yu Xiao rolled his eyes and couldn't help but complain. "Well, flying on foot can satisfy. Are there any other requirements?" Professor Swinton asked. "I want the sword to change size, probably similar to, well, the space expansion spell, just like your bag." Qin Yu expressed another idea of his. "Well, changing the size is somewhat troublesome. I have to discuss this with Professor Snape and others." After Professor Swinton said this, he continued, "Is there anything else?" "Be sharper," Qin Yu said. If a sword could just fly, then he didn't think it was anything special. It was just a bare broomstick handle. Well, this can be. Also, can we add some special effects, such as... Then, Qin Yu talked about his various ideas incessantly. When he made his 28th request, Professor Swinton looked at the night sky and said to Qin Yu leisurely, "Qin, I suddenly lost interest in making this sword for you. Otherwise, just pretend that I didn't say anything. Let's say goodbye. I'll go and admire the moon. I think this bright moonlight can help me gain peace of mind." "No, Professor, I was wrong. Just make it fly, grow big and small, cut people and, well, just these 3 things will do." Qin Yu quickly lowered his request. "Well, that's pretty much it. As a human being, you must know how to be satisfied." Professor Swinton educated. "You are right with these effects. I am very satisfied," Qin Yu said seriously. Then, Professor Swinton followed Qin Yu to Gryffindor's dormitory area and took away Qin Yu's sword made of alchemy material that was useless except for its beauty. When it was late at night, Qin Yu lay in bed and fell asleep, probably because he slept too much during the day. Then, I thought about what I once said to Hermione, if you dream about someone, then that person will have insomnia. So, is it because someone is dreaming about him that he is having insomnia now? Thinking about this, Qin Yu didn't feel sleepy anyway, so he simply got up from the bed, took a candlestick, paper and pen, and came to the public rest area. There is no one here at this time. According to the regulations, you are not allowed to come out too late. Well, it's just a violation of the work and rest rules. It's not a big deal. Thinking of this, Qin Yu found a table and sat down, put down the candlestick, spread out the letter paper, and started writing with a quill pen. And that piece of paper actually had what Hermione had written on it. I don't know if this girl figured it out on her own or learned it from somewhere. Recently, she began to write some replies similar to Qin Yu's original letters, basically in every paragraph. This virtually increases the interactivity and interest of the letter, as if two people are communicating in the letter. Qin Yu was certainly not unfamiliar with this form. After all, when he read novels in his previous life, there would be various paragraph reviews. Seeing the number of comments displayed after each paragraph gave him the urge to click in. In short, Qin Yu was happy to accept Hermione's new form of correspondence. Then, watching her talk about her life in the letter, talking about Crookshanks getting fat again, talking about the spring in her eyes, talking about, I would suddenly miss him at night and want them to sit together. The scene of chatting until late on the cot in the attic. Every time he saw this, Qin Yu couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth, and then wrote what he wanted to say next to him. After writing a reply to each paragraph in Hermione's letter, Qin Yu spread out a blank piece of paper and began to write what he wanted to share with the girl far away. There are lights and shadows. No matter how dark the night is outside or how noisy, there are always some places and people who can calm you down. Dimensional wall. More than 4,000 words, 2 chapters in one. Thank you to every cutie who sent gifts, reminded me of updates, and commented. Your support really gives me great motivation. Due to limited space, I won't list everyone's IDs here. Then, let me explain again. The gift list in the author's remarks was captured by the system. I don't know exactly how it was done. It is not an omission by the author. Please understand. Chapter 60. When he saw George and Fred carrying a large bucket of fermented crushed apples to feed a magical animal, Qin Yu knew that he didn't quite understand what these two brothers were doing. Hagrid looked at the diligent Weasley twins and said with emotion, if they didn't spend all day thinking about selling things from those magical animals for money, I would really like them. Haha. Qin Yu twitched the corner of his mouth when he heard this. Yes, the Weasley twins are smart and learn everything quickly. After hanging out with Hagrid for more than half a year, they are already very familiar with the magical animals in the Forbidden Forest. If it weren't for the impure purpose, Hagrid would really consider these two boys as confidants and friends. Unfortunately, Uncle Hagrid paid by mistake after all. By the way, almost all the acromantula venom has been sold. I have a lot of money saved here. When will we share it? The uncle suddenly thought of this. In fact, they never had any money. They only used it occasionally and didn't do much accounting. Of course, Qin Yu himself also had a lot of money. How many are there now? Qin Yu asked curiously. Probably more than 2,000 gold galleons. I don't know the specifics, Hagrid replied casually. He is not very concerned about the amount of money. I didn't expect there were so many. Then when George and Fred come back, we will divide them up, Qin Yu said with a bright smile. Human beings love money. In many cases, what they actually love is not the money itself, but the sense of accomplishment brought by the labor value it represents. After working hard for so long, when the golden galleons came into my hands, my heart was filled with the joy of harvest. When George and Fred came back, they were very happy when they heard that they were going to split the money. Of course, they knew how much they had earned during this period, which was more than their parents had earned in several years. If there was a broomstick around, the Weasley brothers would probably be able to fly 7 or 8 times in the sky, and then go to the Whomping Willow to vent their excitement. Wow! Wow! Hagrid dumped the 2 buckets of gold coins on the floor with ease and carelessness. Brothers George and Fred had actually complained about Hagrid's careless treatment of these gold galleons. After all, it would be a bit careless to just put such a large amount of money into 2 old wooden barrels. However, later, they got used to it, because they also realized that no one seemed to be able to easily steal anything from Hagrid, and Hagrid's big dog was watching. Of course, the big dog mentioned here does not refer to the 3-headed dog named Luwei, but an ordinary big dog raised by Hagrid. As for the 3-headed dog, it was placed in the Forbidden Forest by Hagrid. Qin Yu only saw it once or twice. Brothers George and Fred occasionally helped Hagrid deliver some food. After all, he sometimes went out of his way. Far away, too late to feed. Qin Yu waved his wand and uttered a spell. He pointed the wand at the pile of gold galleons. Soon, the gold galleons were neatly stacked in piles of 100. When Hagrid and the Weasley brothers present saw this scene, their eyes could not help but show admiration, because the spell Qin Yu just cast was an ordinary life-organizing spell. Molly Weasley, George and Fred's mother, often used this spell to clean up the kitchen dishes, but Qin Yu actually used it. The idea of counting money is neither ingenious nor ingenious. This made both Hagrid and the Weasley brothers feel like, why didn't I think of using it like this? Of course, they can't blame them, because before this, they never thought they would make so much money, and naturally they couldn't. It's impossible to think of counting with a life-organizing mantra. A total of 24 piles and 86 coins, which is 2,486 gold galleons. Just as the other three people were sighing, Qin Yu had already finished counting the pile of coins. This money, of course, is not only the money from selling the acromantula venom, but also the profits from other things. Wow, so many. That's really a lot. George, Fred, and Hagrid couldn't help but marvel. They had never seen so much money. Especially George and Fred. Although they came from the ancient Weasley family with a long heritage, they were poor since they were young. Even their books were inherited old books used by their brothers Bill and Charlie. Then, I suggest that the 2,400 gold galleons be divided equally, and the remaining 86 galleons be reserved as reserve funds for various expenses. Qin Yu said to the three of them. Well, I have no objection. Hagrid was the first to nod. He didn't worry about how much or how to divide it. He just waited for it to be divided. After the money was divided, he planned to buy another moleskin coat, a pair of rabbit fur gloves, and a pair of beaver fur boots. The ones he had before were already too old. Of course, there is no rush to buy these winter coats. Hagrid just has this plan. When George and Fred heard this, they looked at each other, and Fred said, George and I discussed it before, and we think the money should be divided into 3 parts. 3 copies. Qin Yu was slightly stunned, but after a moment's thought, he roughly understood what they were thinking. Why 3? Aren't there 4 of us? Hagrid was completely confused. That's it. We feel that the profit this time should be divided according to the amount of labor and contribution. George continued. Yes, the one who contributed the most this time is Qin. If Qin hadn't killed those acromantulas, we would definitely not have harvested so much venom. Fred followed. Although they didn't know the truth behind Qin's killing of the acromantula, they also knew that it was probably his secret. They had never mentioned it too much. They mentioned it this time to tell Qin Yu that they had never forgotten it. Who has made the greatest contribution to the matter? Then, Uncle Hagrid. He is busy and often goes to Diagon Alley and other places to deliver things and conduct transactions. This contribution is also quite big. George looked at Hagrid and said, haha, I didn't do anything. I actually like going to Diagon Alley. I can drink a beer every time, Hagrid said with a silly smile. Hagrid's words made several people present laugh. As for what the two of us do, it's nothing more than packaging the venom, organizing the goods, and communicating with customers through letters. These things combined are not as much as what you do. Fred said that they did it themselves thing. No. I can't do those things you do, but I feel that you have done more than me. It is also more important than me. Hagrid listened and said first. Dealing with other people is really not something Hagrid is good at. Well, I also think what you are doing is quite important. Qin Yu said in a sincere tone. The Weasley brothers were a little satisfied after hearing what Hagrid and Qin Yu said, especially being affirmed by Qin Yu, which made them feel very happy. Hey, since you all say so, then we can take the 1/3 of the money with peace of mind, George said with a smile. Since you insist, let's divide it into 3 parts. Qin Yu did not continue to struggle in this aspect. A reasonable business plan based on distribution according to work is very benign. There is no reason for him to insist on giving more money to the 2 brothers out of modesty or affection. To some extent, this is also a kind of respect for them. With Qin Yu's consent, the Weasley brothers were of course very happy. Then, the 4 people divided the pile of gold galleons into 3 equal parts. Well, the number 2,400 is quite good. It is divisible by both 4 and 3. It is the common multiple of the 2 numbers. After the money was divided, George and Fred counted them one by one. They were not like Qin Yu, who counted them with a magic spell. That was fast, but they didn't feel it. After counting the money, they took out 50 coins and put them into a money bag. Then, they handed the remaining 750 gold galleons to Hagrid, asking Hagrid to help deposit them in Gringotts. Qin Yu was similar to them. He took out dozens of coins and asked Hagrid to help save the rest. So, Hagrid put all the gold galleons back into the 2 old wooden barrels. Well, For people, sharing the money can be regarded as sharing the loneliness. Of course, their mood is very happy. Now I can buy Ron a new set of books. George muttered happily. Forget the books. New and old books are the same. Why not buy him a new robe? Bill's one is too old and Ron will definitely not like it. Fred followed. And the wand. Mom always talks about buying Charlie a new wand when he graduates and works, and then leaves the old one to Ron. You know, Charlie's wand is so worn that it has unicorn hair. It will break sooner or later, George said. Well, Ron must also use a new wand. Fred nodded and said, let's not tell him about this yet. Hee. We will secretly buy it all and give it to him together on the first day of school. We must wait until the last day, George said with a smirk. What a great idea. I can imagine what his expression will be like. He will definitely cry. I'm really looking forward to it. Fred also laughed. Listening to the two brothers discussing how to tease their younger brother, Qin Yu felt a black line on his forehead and sighed in his heart, feeling sorry for poor Ron. However, when he thought about it, his time travel brought about such a big change for Ron. At least it allowed him to use a new wand and put on a new robe. Thinking of this, Qin Yu felt somewhat relieved. If there is something to do, there will be more. If there is nothing, there will be less. The matter of sharing money in Hagrid's cabin is just a small episode in Qin Yu's busy and fulfilling life at Hogwarts. After that, he continued to be busy. In early April, Gryffindor and Hufflepuff played an inter-house Quidditch match, and Qin Yu once again showed off his power on the court. Qin is our king. This slogan echoed over the stadium from time to time and was thoroughly rooted in the hearts of the people. The batsman who cooperated with Qin Yu this time was Fred, because he and George agreed to take turns. Last time it was George who stole the show, and this time it was his turn. The most outstanding thing about Hufflepuff is Seeker Cedric Diggory. The scene where he fought hard to snatch the golden snitch despite the risk of being hit by the bludger left a deep impression on all the audience present. Although I failed to grab it in the end, my courage is commendable. Prior to this, Cedric had actually facilitated many friendly matches between the two academies. In those training matches, the teams from both sides had extensive exchanges. Cedric even once found a way to crack Qin Yu's of course. Qin Yu and the others also found the weaknesses of the Hufflepuff Quidditch team and developed new tactics. This kind of discussion is beneficial to both teams and is very benign. Qin, we have a backup plan, and we will definitely surprise you on the court. Cedric said this during a friendly match. Haha, do you think we have no backup plan? Qin Yu said with a smile at that time. Then, the so-called backup tactics of both sides were just a desperate fight. Quidditch is all about courage. It can be said that this game was quite enjoyable. Although many people were injured and bruised, the players from both sides had a friendly party after the game and drank up 2 large buckets of bubbles bought by Hagrid. Cedric even pulled Qin Yu to touch the cup several times. If there is any alcohol in this drink, this guy must have drank too much. After getting along with him for so long, Qin Yu could also tell that the handsome man was more honest and magnanimous than this person. He had no scheming and was a good friend. Otherwise, he would not have agreed to play a friendly match with Hufflepuff before the game. After training against Gryffindor, the level of Hufflepuff's Quidditch team improved greatly, and they actually tied with Slytherin in the subsequent game. Although they lost in overtime, but it is enough to prove its strength. Although the time at Hogwarts was good, the world was not peaceful. Qin Yu learned more or less about the undercurrents under the calm, such as the Death Eaters and Grindelwald's army, from Dumbledore. The person who told him the most news was actually Hagrid. Dumbledore asked me to pay attention to various news and everyone's thoughts when I was delivering goods to Diagon Alley. In fact, many people thought that Grindelwald's ideas were very good. At least, many wizards did not like them. Hiding because of the Secrecy Act, Hagrid once said to Qin Yu with such worry, and then added, Dumbledore didn't let me tell you this. He said you were too young. This is not the time to get involved in these dangerous things. Thank you, Hagrid, and thank Dumbledore for my concern, Qin Yu said sincerely. Although he rarely sees Lao Deng, Qin Yu can truly feel the Elder's protection for him and many others. This is a very selfless care, and Qin Yu is very grateful in his heart. Of course, there is really nothing he can do now. The only thing he can do is to work hard to learn magic to make himself stronger and become a strong man who can protect himself and others. Then, at the end of spring, Professor Swinton excitedly asked Qin Yu to come to his office after class while giving a lecture. This made the students couldn't help but guess that Qin, as a top student, would probably have to be tutored by the teacher alone after class. Of course, if Qin Yu could hear the voices of these people, he would probably vomit 2 liters of blood and hang up Elvis, the one with the most thoughtful ideas, and give him a whip. Okay, these are just jokes. Everyone was simply curious about things related to Qin Yu, and after class, Qin Yu also left the classroom under everyone's attention and went to the Defense Against Dark Arts teacher's office. Dimensional wall. The update was late and the check-in failed. I have been worrying about it all day, not only to speed up the timeline, but also to write less hurriedly. It is really difficult for me to be fat. This semester should be over soon, but before that, I will explain something. Then, well, after reading 20,000 yuan, only more than 100 people gave gifts. I really don't ask everyone to spend money, just click on the free ones. With your little effort, the little author can make a living. Also, as long as I can write more, I will definitely write more. Sometimes I can't even write a few words after sitting for a long time. I want to beat myself up, but it's useless. The words are useless. Enough talking, it's time to go to bed. Let's go to bed early. Chapter 61. What a sword! When Professor Swinton pulled out the long sword with a metallic luster, Qin Yu couldn't help but let out an admiration. This sword is different from the common Western-style thin sword, but a broad sword that looks very thick. The sword has strong ridges, and its surface has been specially treated to make it as smooth as a wash, and the light is discernible. Just looking at the appearance, it's already very good. For this sword, I borrowed the flying principle of a flying broomstick, and combined with the stretching spell, it can change in size and achieve flight. Professor Swinton said, throwing the sword out, chanting the spell, and the sword grew larger and wider.
Up.
As the classic broomstick command sounded, the sword floated slightly and hovered there. Step on it, Professor Swinton said to Qin Yu. This, are you sure there is no problem? Qin Yu asked. You can't let me fly this sword for the first time, right? Professor Swinton shrugged. Is it appropriate for you to say this to a child like me? Qin Yu couldn't help complaining in his heart. Then, he moved the joints of his hands and feet a few times to prepare for the warm-up. Then he jumped on the spot, jumped up slightly, and then landed on the sword. And when he stepped on it, a suction force instantly sucked his feet, allowing him to stand firmly on it. This is obviously a special adsorption spell. Sure enough, Professor Swinton looked at the surprised look on Qin Yu's face and said quite proudly, I have put a lot of effort into preventing you from falling from the sky. Qin Yu gave Professor Swinton a thumbs up. The next flight was very similar to using a broomstick. Qin Yu had already had experience in this area, but this time he was flying standing up and needed to get used to it. He lowered his body slightly and controlled the sword to fly forward. When he was about to hit the wall, he stopped in time, turned, and then turned back. After doing this several times, Qin Yu was able to fly with ease. Although he was not as skilled as the broomstick, he could still fly as fast as the wind. Seeing Qin Yu mastering the flying skills of the flying sword so quickly, Professor Swinton couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Qin, this kid, really learns everything quickly. Then, I couldn't help but feel a little sad, and thought to myself, it would be great if I could teach him for a while longer. I still have many interesting things I want to teach him. However, I came to this school temporarily and was destined to leave. Thinking of this, Swinton felt quite complicated. Ouch! Qin Yu performed a difficult flip in the air and let out a hearty cheer. Okay, if you keep practicing, you will tear this place apart. Professor Swinton smiled and said angrily. Hey, I'm sorry, Professor. I couldn't control my emotions. Qin Yu stopped steadily beside Professor Swinton. Come down. There is something else. Swinton asked Qin Yu to come down. Huh, something else? Are you using it to chop something? Qin Yu asked curiously. More than dash, Professor Swinton gave up. Qin Yu jumped down happily and stood aside with expectation. Professor Swinton made the sword return to its original size and held it firmly in his hand. Look carefully. After saying this, Professor Swinton softly chanted a spell in his mouth, and the sword in his hand ignited with a bang and a blazing flame. Seeing this scene, Qin Yu's eyes widened instantly. This effect is so cool. Even a man can't resist a flaming sword. I got some phoenix feathers from Professor Dumbledore, and the effect seems to be quite good. Professor Swinton raised his eyebrows and said rather proudly, not only is it good, it's simply beyond imagination. Qin Yu would not begrudge his words of praise. Besides, after Professor Swinton said these words, he swung his sword. The flames disappeared instantly, and a layer of frost quickly formed on the sword body. He looked left and right, then swung the long sword with frost and struck at his desk. Then, a corner of the table separated from the table body and hit the floor with a thud. This is the function of those ancient spells, Professor Swinton explained. That's right. It was the ancient incantation they used to make a pyramid refrigerator that he flexibly applied to this sword. Awesome. Qin Yu clapped his hands and praised. Besides, Professor Swinton continued to shake the sword, and a green light gradually appeared on the sword. Is this acromantula venom? Qin Yu subconsciously guessed. Ha ha ha, you have good taste, Professor Swinton said with a smile. This is very practical. Qin Yu praised. Besides, the green light faded, the airflow around the sword body stirred, and a sharp wind appeared. Besides, the sound of the wind subsided, and the sword emitted a dazzling white light. Besides, the color of the sword body changes and quickly matches the surrounding environment, making it difficult to distinguish. Besides, the sword body became soft and wrapped around the arm. Besides, with the voice of more, Professor Swinton showed Qin Yu the various functions of this sword, and also displayed the wild imagination and outstanding talents of a genius wizard. By the end, Qin Yu no longer expressed emotion or agreement, but quietly watched Professor Swinton's demonstration, as if he was enjoying a wonderful performance. Yes, isn't a wizard with extraordinary abilities an artist who manipulates magic? Of course, while admiring it, Qin Yu couldn't help but sigh. How many galleons did it cost to realize these functions? Professor Swinton is indeed from a wealthy family. He also has a very strong money-making ability. Okay, that's about it. After the demonstration, Professor Swinton put away his sword and said to Qin Yu, Professor, I remember that I made a lot of requests before, but you didn't agree. Why did you do more than what I asked for? Qin Yu couldn't help but ask, Can this be the same? Professor Swinton raised his eyebrows and continued, You make so many demands, which is called wishful thinking, but I do so many, which is called surprise. When Qin Yu heard this, he felt speechless. Then, I felt that what Professor Swinton said actually made some sense. The only fly in the ointment is that many of these functions can only be used once or twice, and cannot be used again in a short period of time. This has something to do with the operation of magic. After all, according to the conservation law of magic, what kind of effect you achieve depends on consume the corresponding magic power. This is an insurmountable rule, Professor Swinton said with some regret. To put it bluntly, there is not enough magic power, or to use game terminology, well, there is not enough blue. This is already very good. It's really beyond my imagination. Qin Yu said again. Then, I'll leave it to you. Professor Swinton handed the sword in his hand to Qin Yu. Qin Yu took it over excitedly. Of course, the professors all knew about the news that Qin Yu finally obtained a sword that could be ridden, stepped on, to fly. After all, in order to modify this sword, Professor Swinton often communicated with other professors. Not to mention borrowing the phoenix feather from Dumbledore, and then Professor McGonagall contributed a series of ideas related to the transfiguration spell. Mrs. Hooch's understanding of the structure of the broomstick was of great help, and Professor Flitwick's knowledge of charms, Professor Sprout's knowledge of herbal medicine, was also applied to this sword. Of course, the most important contribution is the contribution of Professor Snape. He participated in almost the whole process of the conception and modification of this sword, and always said, that kid Qin likes to sensationalize, so what should you do? Therefore, after Qin Yu obtained the sword, he thanked every professor in person. Then, one day, Professor Dumbledore took time out of his busy schedule to come to the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher's office and see the effect of the sword in person. This reminds me of the sword of Gryffindor, Dumbledore commented highly. Then, Lao Deng said regretfully, however, this sword still lacks some opportunities to become a legend. What opportunity? Professor Swinton couldn't help but asked curiously. I don't know either, Dumbledore said with a smile. Professor Snape, who was standing aside, looked at Dumbledore's smiling eyes with a thoughtful look on his face. Qin Yu secretly thought, listening to your words is like listening to a single word. Of course, he didn't dare to say this. Then, Qin Yu opened the large pyramid that had been kept at Professor Swinton's place, took out a glass of ice drink, and gave it to Professor Dumbledore. Dumbledore took a few sips and nodded in approval. Not bad, not bad. The weather is getting hot now. It's very refreshing to drink this. After finishing the drink and before leaving, Lao Deng looked at the large pyramid placed in the corner and said in a casual tone, The alchemy material is very good. It is too luxurious to use to preserve food. Hearing this, the three people present immediately lost their composure. Even the always cold Professor Snape couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. As the saying goes, hit someone without slapping someone in the face, and expose someone without exposing their shortcomings. After saying this, Professor Dumbledore left as if nothing had happened. The three people in the room were left standing awkwardly. After a long silence, Professor Swinton was the first to speak. Qin, how about... Whoosh! Before he could finish speaking, Qin Yu drew out his sword neatly. Professor Snape opened the pyramid and took out the contents one by one. Then, a cold light flashed, and with a bang, the pyramid split into two. The three people present all breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. I think these alchemy materials can have many uses, Professor Swinton said seriously. That's right, that's right. Qin Yu nodded. Yeah, Professor Snape said as well. No matter what you do, it is more useful than making a pyramid refrigerator. Qin Yu added in his heart. He had actually wanted to say this for a long time. The two professors Snape and Swinton had the same idea, but they were too embarrassed to say it because of their shame. After all, this was something they had been working on for a long time. I didn't expect to be exposed by Dumbledore today. Now that a consensus has been reached, it's time to go back to the drawing board and reinvent the wheel. What to do? Qin Yu asked. Professor Snape and Professor Swinton looked at him and the sword in his hand at the same time. Then, the two looked at each other again, and their thoughts coincided. Soon, the time went from the end of April to the end of May. The current school year of Hogwarts School is coming to an end, classes are basically over, and final exams are about to begin. Before the exam began, Professor Snape and Professor Swinton also completed their respective studies behind closed doors. When two swords of different shapes were put together, Qin Yu was also present. Then, by some strange coincidence, he also pulled out his own. The three swords touched each other with a clang sound, as if they were connected by blood, and they resonated. They come from the same source and seem to be somehow connected. Ha ha ha, it's really an interesting thing, Professor Swinton said with a smile. Well, I didn't expect it to have such an effect. Qin Yu followed. The materials are the same, so it's not surprising that there are some connections. After Professor Snape finished speaking, he took back his classically elegant thin sword. Then, he said in a calm tone, Stephen, when do you plan to leave? Severus, do you have to ask such a question at such a happy moment? Professor Swinton sighed. Since parting is inevitable, why avoid talking about it? Professor Snape rarely said such emotional words. Qin Yu was actually somewhat silent when Snape asked the first question. Since he entered school, Professor Swinton has given him all-out help and guidance. Sometimes, Qin Yu regards him as an older brother with whom he talks about everything. Now that the separation is imminent, he naturally has mixed feelings in his heart. Life is probably parting again and again. Qin Yu thought so. Okay, let's say goodbye. Let's have a drink today to say goodbye. Professor Swinton found a bottle of old red wine. He and Snape each poured a glass. Because Qin Yu was too young, even though he was greedy, he was still severely rejected by the two. He could only drink a kind of wine that had a similar taste but did not contain alcohol. This kind of alcohol-like will also have the effect of getting drunk, but it is still different from real wine. Then, the three of them toasted to farewell in this office, drank a glass, and then poured another glass, because there seemed to be too many words of farewell. When all three of them were drunk, Qin Yu patted the shoulders of the two professors and said vaguely and emotionally, Two professors, I have an idea. I don't know whether to talk about it or not. Just say whatever you want. Professor Swinton, who was also drunk, said with a wave of his hand. Tell me, I promise I won't scold you today. Professor Snape also promised. His face was slightly red at this time, and his eyes were already a little blurry. With the influence of alcohol, his thoughts seemed to have entered some long-lasting memories. With the agreement of the two professors, Qin Yu said with a smile, That's what I think. You see, we are destined to be together, and we both have a sword. In the Muggle world, we are the legendary Three Musketeers. Yeah, I've heard this story. Professor Swinton continued. Then, why don't we become sworn friends? Qin Yu said, looking at the two of them drowsily but with bright eyes. Sworn brother? Professor Swinton asked blankly. Yes, from now on, we are half-brothers. Of course, we can do our own thing. I call you Professor, and you call me third brother. Drunk, Qin Yu felt that his idea was simply too good. Okay, third brother. You are my biological brother. Professor Swinton also patted Qin Yu on the shoulder and said, Third brother? Snape also shouted in confusion. Hey, big brother, second brother. Qin Yu happily hugged their shoulders and replied. Then, The three of them continued to clink glasses. Tonight is about farewell. Tonight is about meeting before. One night of drunkenness will bring rest. The other night of drunkenness is absurd. Dimensional wall. The initial idea was that the pyramid had some use. Later, I wanted to split it and make 3 swords. This could be regarded as a bond between the 3 people. Then, Qin Yu is an adult soul after all, so it is normal for him to treat the 2 professors as brothers. Well, I have been in a bad state recently and my writing is not very smooth. Please bear with me. Thank you to the great master who recognized me for remembering the past, and thank you to every reader for your gifts, reminders, and comments. The author would like to thank everyone here. Chapter 62. Will Professor Snape kill me to silence me? This is a question Qin Yu has been thinking about in the past 2 days. What happened that night can really be described as social death, and it was a complete death. Why the hell do you want to have a Hogwarts sworn brother? The cliff is drunk, and the most important thing is that Professor Snape is also involved here. No one in their right mind would force Snape to call him eldest brother and ask him to call him third brother, right? Just thinking about it afterwards makes people shiver. I, probably, 80%, maybe, won't survive this year's year-end banquet. Qin Yu thought in his heart. Note, the year-end banquet is a banquet at the end of a school year, held before the start of summer vacation. This caused him to lose focus during final exams this school year. So much so, that during the herbology exam, his quill was stuck on the test paper and was not lifted up for a long time. It was smeared with a large piece of ink, and Professor Sprout had to give him a new one. Then, during the charms exam, he peeled off the skin of the pineapple used to test the levitation spell, dug out the eyes of the pineapple, and subconsciously planned to find some salt water to soak it in. Fortunately, Professor Flitwick was a kind person, gave him a new one, and enthusiastically reminded him to pay attention to the exam questions, which saved his magic studies from being killed. There was also the Transfiguration class exam. The mouse used as a transformation prop was turned into a tomato, and the question required a goblet. In short, if it weren't for his popularity among professors, his exams this school year would have been a waste. Severus, Qin seems to be a little out of shape during exams recently. Do you know what happened to him? Professor McGonagall asked Snape curiously at the regular teacher meeting at Hogwarts. After hearing this, Professor Snape closed his eyes and was silent for a moment, then slowly raised his eyelids with long eyelashes. His eyes were calm, and he said in an indifferent tone, "Isn't it normal for him to behave abnormally?" Professor McGonagall was slightly startled when he heard this, then nodded and said, Well, it is indeed like what you said. If he acts too normal, it will be very abnormal. Ahem, yes, Qin. Professor Swinton continued. Then, when he felt the cold gaze from Professor Snape, he decisively changed the topic. Well, I heard that the Pig's Head Bar has a new batch of good red currant rum, and I plan to invite all the professors to join us. Let's have a taste. I wonder if you have time after the exam? Wow, that's great, Professor Flitwick said first. Thank you, Professor Swinton, for the invitation. I will definitely go there, Mrs. Hooch said afterwards. Others also echoed, saying that they would definitely go, while Professor Trelawney showed a shy look. She prefers drinking, and usually drinks some sherry by herself. Then, the short regular meeting ended, and everyone left to continue preparing for the exams of each grade. Soon, it was the first grade's potions exam. This was a subject that required written examinations and practical operations. Early in the morning, Professor Snape put on his flowing black robes and buttoned the robes down to his Adam's apple. After casually looking at his thin self in the mirror, Snape glanced at the classically styled rapier placed on the table. Then, on his usually expressionless face, his cheeks couldn't help but tremble twice. Then, he closed his eyes and a series of mantras came to his mind. Avada Kedavra, the Imperious Curse, the Cruciatus Curse, the Shadowless Blade, the Fire Curse, the Petrification Curse. There are so many skills that it's hard to choose. However, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly unexpectedly, and of course, they soon returned to their previous coldness. Smiling is a very tiring thing for him, because it will remind him of the person who once made him smile from the heart, the person who was deeply hurt by him. She is so beautiful, and her life is so short. And for the rest of his life, he will probably be thinking about why he failed to protect her in the first place. The robe covered his slender body, and his cold eyes covered his black eyes. Professor Snape left the room as calmly as before. The topic of today's exam is to prepare the Potion of Oblivion. The materials and tools used are all at hand. Now, the exam officially begins. Professor Snape raised his voice in the underground classroom where the potions class was located and addressed the students present. They said slowly. Many people lamented after hearing this, and then began to scramble to find the things they needed and weigh them appropriately. Qin Yu paid attention to Professor Snape's expression and behavior with some anxiety. There was nothing he could do about it. Seeing Snape for the first time in the past few days made him feel a little unsure. When it was finally confirmed that Si Jiao did not show any intention to kill him, Qin Yu finally felt relieved. Then concentrate on the preparation of this potion. After a lot of work, when he dropped the last drop of valerian juice, the potion in the crucible turned a light purple, and the potion was officially completed. Well, not bad. A cold and familiar voice sounded in Qin Yu's ears. The sound startled him. Then, turning around, Qin Yu saw Professor Snape's face without any unnecessary expression. I don't know when, Si Jiao was already standing behind him. Probably because he was too focused on configuring the potion, Qin Yu didn't even notice it just now. Professor Snape, Qin Yu said hesitantly. In addition to learning how to prepare potions, you must also keep in mind its efficacy. Professor Snape said this slowly as usual. I will. Qin Yu nodded quickly and said. Then, Professor Snape ignored him and walked away, looking at the students in the classroom who were scratching their heads and trying hard to recall the potion formula, and to prevent someone's cauldron from suddenly exploding so that he could take action in time to help clean up the mess. Watching Professor Snape leave, Qin Yu pondered his words in his heart. Keep in mind the effect of the forgetfulness potion? Haha, Professor Snape is trying to hit me. Qin Yu finally reacted. Then, he was completely relieved. Since it is just for him to forget, it means that what happened that day will not be mentioned, which means that the story is over. Thinking of this, Qin Yu felt much better. Immediately, he realized that it seemed that the last exam on the history of magic was left. After finishing this exam, he could wait for the holiday. What will be tested in the history of magic class? Qin Yu was thinking about this course in his mind, looking forward to the exam starting and ending as soon as possible. You can read more daily new novels on. Both sites share the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again. Chapter 63. Snape didn't make things difficult for you. Third brother, Professor Swinton patted Qin Yu on the shoulder and said. Qin Yu's chest froze, and a mouthful of old blood almost spurted out. At this time, not long after he walked out of the potions classroom, he met Professor Swinton on the road. Professor, can we forget what happened that day? Qin Yu said with a grimace. Thinking about what happened that day, it was actually quite embarrassing. Of course, it doesn't mean that he wasn't sincere at the time, at least 50% sincere and 50% out of his mind, but the age gap between him and the two professors was a bit big, and he didn't respect them somewhat. Who knows, although Professor Snape chose forget and sent this strong signal with the potions exam question, Professor Swinton had no intention of forgetting. I think your idea that day was quite good. This way I have an extra brother and an older brother, Professor Swinton said with great interest. Oh, even if I think what you said makes sense, you should also consider Professor Snape. Look at his usual appearance. Qin Yu said this with a solemn expression, his face elongated, and he gave him a Snape-like cold face. Ha ha ha, what you learned is so similar. Professor Swinton looked at it and almost cried with laughter. Oh, I'm not trying to make you happy, I just want you to think about my situation. You have left, but I will stay here for another 6 years. I don't want to die young before I graduate. Got killed, Qin Yu said helplessly. Okay, I understand how you feel. In fact, I don't dare to mention what happened that day in front of Snape. Professor Swinton said seriously. Well, as long as you understand. Qin Yu was relieved. But when the two of us are together, we don't have to worry about this at all, right, my dear brother? Professor Swinton patted Qin Yu's shoulder again. Qin Yu. It seems that Professor Swinton plans to remember this matter for the rest of his life. Thinking of this, Qin Yu's mentality collapsed. However, when I thought about it again, I realized that this was all my own doing. If I insisted on saying that the three swords were destined to be together, I was possessed by the author of a stupid internet article. Alas, in short, I can't blame anyone else. Once a person accepts his fate, the road becomes wider. Just let him be. Don't you just have to call yourself brother? Qin Yu secretly said. Looking at Professor Swinton's smiling eyes, Qin Yu inexplicably remembered the hidden loneliness he had seen in his eyes. I don't know what kind of story this man who is also a mentor, friend, and brother has. By the way, I have a gift to give you, but it's not ready yet. I'll probably give it to you after the year-end banquet, Professor Swinton said suddenly. Huh, you're not ready. Why did you tell me in advance? Qin Yu said doubtfully. Of course I want you to prepare a gift for me in advance. Professor Swinton said angrily. I'm sorry, my reaction was too slow. Qin Yu said with a smile. It doesn't matter. Snape is the same as you, Professor Swinton said with a shrug. Qin Yu was speechless and silently extended his thumb. The matter of sworn friendship has come to an end temporarily after Professor Snape forgot and Professor Swinton taken it calmly. Well, in fact, every time he thinks about this, Qin Yu has the urge to find a time-turner, go back to the past, and strangle himself to death. However, in a person's life, there will inevitably be 1, 2, 3, or 4 embarrassing things that can lead to a secret room just by thinking about it. It's okay to have one more thing, right? Just don't think about it, let yourself go, and you will feel better. In short, this incident made Qin Yu think about the philosophy of life and how to face various obstacles in life. The exam in the history of magic class was boring. While Qin Yu was thinking about irrelevant things, he used the quill that had been casted with an anti-cheating spell to write long sentences on the test paper in order to explain it, learn about certain events hundreds of years ago, and their impact on the wizarding world. What he didn't understand was why questions like, who invented the self-heating crucible, appeared in the exam. Finally, when Professor Binns announced that the exam time was over, the students cheered enthusiastically. This was probably his most popular moment of the year. After the exams for this course are over, the students will have free control over the next week. After the results come out, the year-end banquet will be held, and then the official vacation will begin. While waiting for the test results, Qin Yu was not idle, but was tinkering with the gift for Professor Swinton in the Hagrid cabin. He made this gift very carefully. First, he mixed the golden baby unicorn hair and white adult unicorn hair that he had collected previously with several other commonly used magical animal hairs and twisted them into a tough special yarn. Then, he used this special yarn, braided into a scarf. Well, at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, giving scarves is a common and popular choice. And what he did is very special. Ugly, a bit ugly, but tough enough. Hagrid tugged on the colorful scarf and gave this comment. I would rather knit a pure white or gold one, which would probably take all of Kelly and Anna's manis out. Qin Yu rolled his eyes and said, however, the value of a scarf mixed with unicorn hair is quite high and can be sold. Well, that's true. Hagrid nodded and said. Then, Qin Yu found a piece of craft paper, wrapped the scarf, and tied it with a rope, planning to wait until Professor Swinton gave him a gift before giving it to him. After the gifts were made, there were still a few days of free time left. Qin Yu had nothing to do, so he took his wand and his sword and eagerly walked into the abandoned women's room on the 3rd floor of Hogwarts Castle. Bathroom. Then, not long after he entered, he came out with a bruised nose and a swollen face. It was like this for several days in a row. This made George and Fred curiously ask after seeing him if he had also gone to the Whomping Willow to relieve their boredom. Relieve the boring hammer. Qin Yu was too lazy to pay attention to these two bored children and asked Hagrid to find a bottle of acromantula venom and add it to the sword according to the method Professor Swinton taught him. Their acromantula venom was running low, so Qin Yu decided not to sell it in the future, but to keep it for himself. When he was ready, Qin Yu went to the women's bathroom again. Qin, you're here again. Can't you talk to me? Myrtle said sadly. After Qin Yu came several times, this ghost who was resident in the women's bathroom already knew him. Next time, I'm in a hurry. Qin Yu moved his joints of his hands and feet and jumped down somewhere. Wow, what a handsome boy. His figure is really perfect. Myrtle, floating in the air, exclaimed in ecstasy. Dimensional Wall, 2 updates. Chapter 64. Have you ever had this experience? When you get a thick, straight, hard stick, you want to hit something with it? Or, when you hold a sharp fruit knife, you have the urge to stab a watermelon? Yes, this is the impact of external objects on people's emotions and mentality. To replace it with a famous saying, it is, with sharp weapons in hand, murderous intentions arise naturally. When you possess great strength or powerful weapons, your heart will change accordingly and you will become confident or violent. This is described in many literary works as people's inner demons. In fact, everyone will have this kind of inner demons. Take Dumbledore, for example. When he was young, he had powerful magical abilities and wanted to change the world and change the rules. At that time, he was so confident because of his power that he was even blindfolded and blocked his sight. Even if his heart is not bad, his emotions will inevitably be influenced by power. Until someone or something wakes him up, then he starts to be wary of power and keep a calm heart. It is difficult to avoid being affected by foreign objects and powerful forces. Therefore, when Qin Yu holds the long sword that can ignite flames, condense frost, and emit green light, how could he not want to chop something? The first thing he thought of was Professor Snape, because Snape had been teaching him how to fight for nearly a year. Of course, Qin Yu quickly rejected this option. Reason told him that if he provoked Professor Snape now, he might die. Then, the Whomping Willow. That was where George and Fred were looking for trouble, and he didn't want to get involved with these two guys. Finally, he naturally thought of the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, a dangerous snake-like creature that had been hidden in Hogwarts for nearly 1,000 years. In fact, when Qin Yu first obtained the ability to speak snakes, he had the urge to go to the secret room to take a look. However, at that time, he could only run away silently and only delivered food when he went there. It's different now. At least, he has been trained by Professor Snape for more than half a year, and he has a good weapon given to him by Professor Swinton. At this time, you can still challenge this hidden boss. Of course, it turned out that he was still a little overconfident. Puff! Qin Yu knelt on one knee and vomited out a mouthful of blood. This time he really vomited blood. At this time, he was at a slightly spacious hub in the secret room. Just now, he avoided the attack of the basilisk's sharp teeth and went around to its back. Unexpectedly, the big snake's tail whipped him hard and flew him to the wall. Then, he fell from the wall. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Qin Yu raised his two pale eyes and looked at the basilisk. Yes, in order to avoid being affected by the basilisk's eyes, Qin Yu used a spell to temporarily turn his eyes into blind eyes. The basilisk's glare is fatal. People who make direct contact with the basilisk's eyes will die. This is how the ghost Myrtle in the women's bathroom died. Even if there is indirect contact, they will be petrified. Of course, he also used spells to enhance the perception of other senses, so that he could clearly see every move of the basilisk. In short, Qin Yu made sufficient preparations before coming here. However, in the face of absolute power, no amount of preparation can make up for the gap in strength. Moreover, he does not have Phoenix Fox as an assistant, and the sword in his hand cannot be compared to the sword of Gryffindor. Naturally, it cannot be like Harry Potter. Kill the basilisk. In other words, if a blood strip is attached to this basilisk, what Qin Yu will be doing now is scraping. However, for testing this sword and training your ability to deal with enemies, basilisk is a good choice. Ding. The host is now in danger. Please make the following choices. 1. Rely on yourself and face the basilisk alone, and you will be rewarded with 1,000 gold galleons. 2. Give the body to Obscurus, kill the basilisk, and reward the basilisk fangs. The system's voice sounded again. Yes, again. Ever since Qin Yu jumped into this secret room, the system has appeared once a day. Are you using your power to seduce me? Right, system? Qin Yu was wary of the basilisk while communicating with the system in his mind. I'm sorry, I don't want to hand myself over to a Moran just yet. At least, I don't want to experience the feeling of losing control of my body until the real moment of life and death, Qin Yu said leisurely in his mind. So, I still choose the first option. Ding. The host chooses to rely on himself and face the basilisk alone. This is a manifestation of courage. The reward is 1,000 gold galleons. When Qin Yu heard the system sound, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Being able to get system rewards was one of his gains from challenging the basilisk in the secret room in the past 3 days. Now that you've made your choice, let's do it seriously. Pung! The long sword ignited flames. Qin Yu's face was determined. He jumped up with all his strength and slashed at the huge Snake King. Qin, your recent injuries seem to be more serious, with several broken ribs. Mrs. Pomfrey, the school doctor, said with a frown. Qin Yu is a frequent visitor to the school infirmary, and Madame Pomfrey has long been used to it. However, his injuries have been obviously more serious recently than before. Fortunately, it's not fatal, and he can't die here. Did Snape do it? Madame Pomfrey boldly guessed, because she had also heard that 2 professors, Snape and Swinton, were privately tutoring Qin Yu, and Swinton obviously would not do such a heavy hand. So only Snape was the most suspect. Well, it's not Professor Snape. I was playing with a big guy recently, and it obviously has a bad temper. But don't worry, I should be able to adapt to it soon, and I won't be so easily injured in the future. Qin Yu could only speak vaguely. Well, stay safe. Madame Pomfrey said no more. After all, she knew that although this child had an out-of-touch personality, he was very mature and independent, and he must do things in a measured way. After leaving Madame Pomfrey, Qin Yu felt that most of his injuries were healed. He had actually decided to suspend the trial plan because tomorrow was the year-end banquet, and he didn't want to attend it with a wounded face. And after the year-end banquet is summer vacation, you can't go back with a swollen pig's head, right? Hermione was so frightened that she cried. Thinking of Hermione, Qin Yu found that he really felt like he was returning home. I don't know if the girl has grown taller again after not seeing each other for half a year. Although I received a photo from Hermione, it still can't compare with seeing her in person. Then he thought about his Christmas vacation with Hermione. So, the summer vacation is so long. What should we do? Of course, Hermione had started listing her summer vacation plans in her letter a month ago and was constantly adding to them. Thinking about the plans she mentioned in the letter, such as go to XXX shop to eat desserts, go to XXX park to see fish, go to XXX river to camp, need to apply for permission from parents, Qin Yu couldn't help but smile. Show a smile. Summer vacation, come quickly. Qin Yu's mind had already left Hogwarts early and flown to a place thousands of miles away. Chapter 65. Mom, what day is it today? Hermione asked with a pout. June 14th. My dear, this is the 11th time you have asked me since you woke up this morning, Mrs. Granger said patiently. Then Qin should attend Hogwarts' year-end banquet tonight. Hermione muttered. Yeah, Qin's score in this exam is the first in the grade, and he will definitely be praised by the teachers. Mrs. Granger had already known about Qin's score from Hermione. Then Qin can get on the train tomorrow morning and come back in the afternoon or evening. Hermione continued to ramble. Yes, dear. Mrs. Granger could only choose to nod in agreement. Otherwise, the child would keep mumbling. Then, she interrupted at the right time. Baby, you should have breakfast, otherwise you will be late for the exam. You don't want Qin to tell him that you failed the exam when he comes back, right? Well, I'll go to school after eating, and I'll definitely be the first in my grade. Hermione said with fighting spirit after hearing this. Yes, that's how it should be. I'll pour you another glass of juice. Mrs. Granger stood up with a smile. Thank you, Mom. Hermione said sweetly. Then, she quickly finished her breakfast and drank the juice her mother poured for her. On the way to school, Hermione thought about her long summer vacation plans, but she couldn't help but feel a little distressed at the end. I have saved pocket money for more than a year, but I don't know if it will be enough. The little girl thought in her heart. Well, in fact, she never knew how much money Qin Yu had. The last time she went to Diagon Alley to buy things, she saved money everywhere, mainly because she didn't know much about the currency in the magical world, so she just felt that Qin Yu must be saving money. I saved that money by living frugally. Then, she decided that she would pay for the expenses of this summer vacation. After all, most of her plans were Muggle World activities, and she did not need to spend those Wizarding World coins. I should find a job, but unfortunately, many places don't want me, Hermione thought helplessly. The little girl, who had been thinking about something all the way, quickly walked into the school and started her exam. Well, in order to get first in grade, she decided not to think about the summer vacation for the time being and concentrate on answering the questions on the test paper. There is a saying that Merlin's pants have two legs, so the story is divided into two parts. While Hermione was concentrating on taking the exam for the first place in grade, Qin Yu was in Hagrid's cabin picking out things to take back. At this time, on the floor of the cabin, there were a lot of various goods that Hagrid had bought from Hogsmeade Village in recent days, including food, clothing, and supplies. Qin Yu actually wanted to take the unicorn fur scarf home to Hermione, but after thinking about it, he and Hermione had a long life together, and they would spend a long, long time together. He would give her something good in the future. That's it, and Professor Swinton is leaving. I always give him a decent gift before leaving. Even if Hermione knew about this, she would definitely not care about it. After all, her family members were easy to talk about. Then, Qin Yu thought about bringing more small gifts to this girl, so that she could enjoy them no matter what. So, he asked Hagrid to buy these. Unfortunately, my suitcase is too small and can't hold too many things, Qin Yu muttered helplessly. I don't know if Professor Swinton understood what he meant after giving him crazy hints for most of the school year, and then gave him the bag. Qin Yu was full of expectations for the gift that Professor Swinton was going to give him. The year-end banquet is held at dusk. When the sun faded its last rays of light, the lights all over Hogwarts suddenly lit up, making this majestic, ancient castle even more magical. Of course, the castle itself is synonymous with magic. It is a great wizard school that resounds throughout the magical world. It delivers batch after batch of outstanding wizard talents to the society every year. Well, that's a joke. In short, when you are in the famous Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in the Wizarding World, You will find that her charm is far more shocking than the legends about her. Qin Yu was like this. He looked at the Hogwarts auditorium during the feast and was deeply impressed by its magnificence, grandness, and magic again. In this situation, I have something to say. Qin Yu stood at the entrance of the auditorium and said excitedly. What is it? Elvis asked curiously. Today, we are proud of Hogwarts, and tomorrow, Hogwarts will be proud of us. Qin Yu said seriously. Ba bang bang. Several children clapped after hearing this. Qin, what you said is great. I'm really proud to be a student at Hogwarts. Elvis said first. Qin, do you think we will really become the pride of Hogwarts in the future? Jimmy followed. Well, as long as we work hard, we can do it. Qin Yu nodded to them. Well, Qin Yu was also infected by the atmosphere in the auditorium and couldn't help but feel a little unable to contain his emotions. Human beings are creatures that are easily influenced by the group. When everyone around you is excited, you will inevitably become excited and excited along with them. Especially when the surrounding environment is enough to infect people, such as the Hogwarts auditorium at this moment. Students came in one after another and sat down at the long tables in their respective colleges. Soon after, Dumbledore and the professors walked up to the guest of honor stage, and the former gave the speech before the banquet. Children, another school year has passed. I hope that this school year, you have gained more, learned more magic knowledge, and made more friends. Summer vacation is coming soon. While you are enjoying the vacation, remember to digest what you have learned, free up your brain, and prepare for the next year. So, here are the results of the House Cup that many people are concerned about. The scores of each house are Hufflepuff 372 points, Ravenclaw 416 points, Slytherin 422 points, Gryffindor 436 points. Gryffindor led Slytherin by 14 points and became the new Academy Cup champion, ending Slytherin's 6 consecutive years of winning the championship. Dumbledore waved, and the flag hanging above the auditorium was instantly replaced by the Gryffindor lion flag, with gold and bright red becoming the main colors today. The Gryffindor students all turned red with excitement and felt very proud. Of course, Qin Yu made a big contribution to surpassing Slytherin in terms of points this time. After being deducted a bunch of points, he pulled back bit by bit. He was really exhausted and it was not easy. I announced that the banquet has begun. Please enjoy today's food and wine. Dumbledore raised his glass and said. After hearing this, the students burst into warm applause, and then began to enjoy the food while talking and laughing. Hagrid, who was sitting in the guest of honor seat, couldn't wait to pick up a glass of brandy and drink it, and soon poured another glass. Qin Yu had been hungry for a long time, and he ate without any image at all along with several children. He thought that in the next 2 months or so, he would miss the food at Hogwarts very much, so he should eat enough tonight. When Qin Yu was very full and was drinking a cup of honey tea that George handed over casually, his eyes wandered and he saw Professor Swinton on the guest of honor table, who nodded to him and pointed outside the auditorium. Qin Yu understood, nodded, and immediately left his seat. Soon after, the two met in a corridor outside the auditorium. Okay, I'll give you the gift I promised you. Professor Swinton casually threw a small cloth bag to Qin Yu. Qin Yu caught it with a slight disappointment, because this thing was obviously not the bag he expected. However, this thing is heavy and seems to have some weight. Open it and take a look, said Professor Swinton. Qin Yu obeyed and opened the cloth bag curiously. Then, a golden mask was revealed inside. What is this? Qin Yu asked doubtfully. An alchemy mask. Professor Swinton paused, then continued. This is a combination of the ideas in the book you gave me, the ancient charms on the pyramid, and my many years of alchemy experience. Something made. Seeing that Qin Yu had no reaction, Professor Swinton continued. After wearing it, not only will your facial features be blocked, but your voice, your posture, and all your body's external information will be changed. So powerful? Qin Yu was really surprised now. This thing is so useful, even comparable to Qin Yu's high-level illusion body curse. After all, the illusion body curse makes the body completely invisible, and this mask allows him to appear without being recognized by others. The abilities of both different, applicable scenarios are also different. Of course, it took me more than 2 months to do it, Professor Swinton said rather proudly. In other words, he was thinking about parting more than 2 months ago and silently prepared gifts for Qin Yu. Thinking of this, Qin Yu changed his usual attitude and solemnly said, Thank you, Professor Swinton. Okay, you don't have to be polite to me. Who made me your brother? Professor Swinton winked at Qin Yu and said. Qin Yu was immediately embarrassed on the spot and speechless. Seriously, I have been thinking for a long time about what I should give you. That sword is a weapon that can enhance your strength when you are in danger. And since you often cause trouble, this mask can very well protect you. You hide and protect your safety so that you don't have to worry about being discovered if you want to do bad things in the future, Professor Swinton said seriously. Wait, why have I become a troublemaker? It's obviously me who is unlucky every time, okay? Also, why should I do bad things? I'm a very decent person, okay? Qin Yu couldn't help complaining in his heart. Oh, you are so thoughtful, Qin Yu said with a smile on his face. It's all what I should do. I've attached the instructions for using the mask on that piece of paper. You can go back and take a closer look, Professor Swinton said quite complacently, and then asked Qin Yu, by the way, where's the gift? What are you going to give me? Upon hearing this, Qin Yu took out the package he had prepared long ago from his robe and handed it to Professor Swinton. Swinton took it, opened it, and lifted up the colorful scarf. That's it, he said rather disgustedly. What's that? I worked hard to knit this with unicorn hair, but its toughness is not comparable to that of ordinary materials. Qin Yu said very dissatisfied. I'm not saying that the material is not good, but I think it's a bit ugly, and wearing it around my neck may not suit my temperament. Professor Swinton said this and wrapped the scarf around his neck. Then, show it to Qin Yu. If you don't like it, then give it back to me. Qin Yu rolled his eyes and said angrily, There's no reason to take something back as a gift. Professor Swinton adjusted the scarf around his neck again and muttered, Don't tell me, it just looks good. The tall Professor Swinton was wearing a gray scarf, which was indeed a bit strange. Seeing him like this, Qin Yu couldn't help but want to laugh. However, before the smile appeared on his face, his nose was inexplicably sore. When will you leave? He finally asked. Just tonight. I happened to attend Hogwarts' year-end banquet and said goodbye to you all, Professor Swinton said with a shrug. Qin Yu didn't expect him to leave so soon. However, parting is destined, and it doesn't make much difference if it's one day earlier or one day later. After all, I will leave Hogwarts early tomorrow morning. Then, let's have a farewell hug. Qin Yu opened his arms and showed a bright smile. Haha, yes, a farewell hug. Professor Swinton also opened his arms and hugged the little boy in front of him, who often let himself ignore his age. Take care, Professor Swinton, Qin Yu said. Take care of yourself, Qin. Professor Swinton patted him on the shoulder and said. After Qin Yu said goodbye to Swinton, he returned to the auditorium again and sat in his previous seat. Looking at the lively crowd, his thoughts wandered, and a faint smile gradually appeared at the corner of his mouth. Hogwarts is so beautiful tonight. Everyone enjoyed the feast and hustle and bustle before leaving. Dimensional Wall. Taking advantage of the weekend, please give me a small gift and some free advertising. You can read more daily new novels on. Both sites share the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again. Chapter 66. Come back, come back. Qin Yu hummed a tune that only remembered a few lyrics and walked out of Gryffindor Tower in a happy mood and walked towards the lakeside pier. Qin, what song are you singing? It sounds nice. Elvis pulled the heavy suitcase and caught up with Qin Yu, panting. The latter was very relaxed, and the box in his hand did not weigh much. The reason is simple. Professor Swinton gave him the bag, which allowed him to put most of his stuff in it. By the way, early this morning, an owl knocked on the window of Qin Yu's dormitory, then dropped something and left. That thing is none other than Professor Swinton's bag with the space expansion spell. This is a good thing and cannot be made casually. Even if it is made, it will not be as good as Professor Swinton's. Make. Qin Yu was immediately overjoyed and felt that Professor Swinton could be trusted. He would really give you what you need. Next time, just say whatever you want. This was the only sentence written on the attached note. Well, it's a song that expresses the happy mood of returning home from vacation, Qin Yu said casually, and then asked Elvis, what are your plans for the summer vacation? After hearing this, Elvis scratched his head and said shyly, I don't have any plans. I will probably read the first-grade books, especially the potions textbook. Qin Yu knew that Elvis almost failed the potions exam, which made the child's eyes red when he found out the result. There was no way. Elvis was timid, introverted, and had an instinctive fear of Snape. During potions class, he spent most of his time worrying about making mistakes and being scolded by Professor Snape. How can you learn well in class with such a mentality? You don't have to be afraid of Professor Snape. He's just cold on the surface, and at most he's a bit venomous. In fact, he won't really do anything to you. Qin Yu enlightened Elvis again. I also know that one time my crucible burned and cracked, and he helped me replace it with a new one. But I am still a little afraid of him, and I am afraid that I will not learn well. Elvis stammered. Well, you may be a little stressed when facing him. It should be fine after you get used to it. Then you should review it at home. If you have any questions, you can ask your owl to send a message to me. Qin Yu stopped trying to persuade him. He still had to change this matter on his own. Is that really okay? Elvis said with bright eyes. What's wrong with this? We are friends. Isn't it normal to communicate with each other? Qin Yu said with a smile. Yeah, I'll write you a letter. Elvis nodded sharply. Then, he asked Qin Yu, Qin, what are your plans for the summer vacation? Me. Qin Yu was stunned, then cleared his throat and said with a bit of reserve, I actually didn't make any arrangements. Others made them for me. Already arranged? I also want to be arranged, but unfortunately I am often the only one at home during the holidays, Elvis said enviously. Qin Yu patted his shoulder, not knowing how to comfort him. After all, not everyone had a girl at home. Get on the boat. Get on the boat quickly. There are many people going home for the summer vacation. Be careful not to catch the train. Hagrid shouted and urged at the lakeside pier. After hearing this, the students quickened their pace, jumped on the boats, and followed the fleet to the other side. After Qin Yu and Elvis got on the boat, he looked back at the Hogwarts castle that was gradually moving away, saying goodbye in his heart and looking forward to seeing the beautiful autumn of Hogwarts again when he comes back next time. The Hogwarts Express departs on time at 9 o'clock in the morning, loaded with students leaving school. This time was different from the Christmas holiday. Qin Yu's box was full of people. The first was Elvis, who was sitting next to Qin Yu with a satisfied look on his face. Since he followed Qin Yu closely, he easily grabbed a seat in the box. Then came George and Fred, the Weasley twins who came in quickly and quickly occupied 2 positions. Bach, Jimmy, and Wilson originally wanted to sit in, but it was too crowded for 7 people in one box, so they had to go to the side and come to visit from time to time. They stayed for a long time and didn't want to sit here. No difference. In the meantime, Cedric also came over to chat with Qin Yu and the others for a while. Seeing that there was really no room in the box, he left with a look of helplessness. I heard that Charlie is going to Romania to study dragons after graduation? Qin Yu asked the Weasley brothers. Well, this is probably the thing he is most interested in besides Quidditch. George shrugged. However, I think he still hopes to join a professional Quidditch team, but it is too difficult. Fred sighed and said, such a topic makes everyone somewhat silent. At this time, the train passed through a beautiful Muggle town, where a group of fat sheep were grazing on the grass. Everyone's eyes were attracted by this scenery, and they said nothing for a while. Before stopping, the students all took off their wizard robes and put on summer clothes. Boys wore simple shorts and short tops, while many girls wore beautiful skirts. Of course, some wore like a boy, like Monty Wanda. Finally, the train stopped at Platform 9 and March 4th at King's Cross Station. Everyone got off the train, groups of 2 or 3, passed through the wall, and entered the station in the Muggle world. Of course they went out in batches so as not to attract the attention of the Muggles. Bye, Qin. See you at school, Qin. Looking forward to your performance next year, Qin. Many students passing by said hello to Qin Yu. George and Fred beside him were extremely envious of Qin Yu's popularity and vowed that they would practice Quidditch skills during the summer vacation and surprise everyone when school starts. Soon, Qin Yu and the others came to the exit of the Muggle world, and many young wizards found their families who came to pick them up. Brothers George and Fred saw their mother Molly Weasley, their brother Ron, and their sister Ginny who came to pick them up. Then, see you later, Qin. George waved goodbye to Qin Yu. I will miss you, Qin. Fred hugged Qin Yu. Goodbye, I will miss you too. Qin Yu said goodbye to the 2 brothers. Then, he waved to Mrs. Weasley, who was not far away, as a greeting. After seeing off George, Fred and the others, Qin Yu shrugged and pulled his suitcase forward. At this moment, a voice as sweet as a lark sounded. Qin, dimensional wall. I caught a cold and had a headache for a day, but I just got over it. There is one more chapter. Chapter 67. Qin. That nice voice called again. Then, Qin Yu looked towards the place where the sound came from, and saw a petite figure rushing towards him like a gust of wind. As soon as he raised his arms, the figure jumped into his arms and hugged him tightly. Hermione? Why are you here? Qin Yu said to the little girl in his arms in surprise. Hee, aren't you surprised? The little girl raised her face and said to Qin Yu with a smile. Yeah, what a surprise. Qin Yu couldn't help but rub her brown hair. After not seeing each other for half a year, Qin Yu noticed that Hermione's hair had grown a lot longer and was about to reach her waist. Mom and Dad are here too. Hermione let go of Qin Yu and pointed in the direction she came from. Hermione, why are you running so fast? Wait for us. The speaker was a somewhat out-of-breath Mrs. Granger, followed by Mr. Granger. Aunt Jenny, Uncle David. Qin Yu quickly greeted them. Mrs. Granger was naturally very happy to see Qin Yu and held his hand without letting go. Mr. Granger enthusiastically helped Qin Yu get the suitcase. However, he stumbled and almost fell when he was carrying the box, because the box was too light and the force he just used was too much. Although the weight of the box was lighter than he expected, after thinking about it, he was relieved. It was summer after all, and Qin probably didn't bring much clothes. My parents were lost just now, and I didn't know where to wait for you. Fortunately, I found a lot of boys and girls with strange behaviors. I guess that they were probably the wizards who came home with you on vacation. So I followed looking in the direction they came from. I didn't expect to see you. Hermione said, her reasoning quite proudly. Well, that's a very smart method. Qin Yu praised. Right? I think I can be Sherlock Holmes. The little girl who received the compliment said happily. What about me? Qin Yu pointed at himself. Of course you are Watson. Hermione said this, holding the non-existent pipe, and said seriously, Oh, my dear Watson, this case is actually very simple. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Hermione's performance caused the Grangers and his wife sitting in the front seat of the car to burst into laughter. Well, they were very happy. Their daughter and Qin were talking about things they knew, not topics about the magical world, so that they could understand clearly. However, when my daughter starts school, she will probably talk about some weird-sounding things, such as how to fly on a broomstick and how to make pea vines grow into the sky. This idea came to Mr. and Mrs. Granger's mind almost at the same time. By that time, their daughter will be farther and farther away from them, right? The two looked at each other and saw reluctance in each other's eyes. However, Hermione and they are not from the same world after all. Qin, would you do this? Hermione made a finger opening and closing motion with her hand. What's so difficult about this? Qin Yu also followed suit. You can actually do it? Then I'll change it to another one. Hermione said rather unconvinced. Well, then you have to do something more difficult. Qin Yu said. It must be difficult. Seeing the two children in the back row playing a seemingly boring game, Mrs. Granger smiled and felt a little relieved. Yes, even if Hermione is in another world, at least Qin is with her. At this moment, a familiar broad hand covered Ginny Granger's hand, conveying a message to her. I will always be with you. Mrs. Granger felt warm in her heart and looked at her husband affectionately. In the front row were the Grangers who were in a state of confusion, and behind them was Qin Yu and Hermione, who were chatting about various topics after a long separation. The car drove them slowly towards the warm home. Mid-June coincides with midsummer. However, deep in a dense forest on the banks of the Devon River in Yorkshire, it seemed particularly deserted. And among the tall trees, there is a manor covering a large area. In fact, if an ordinary human passes by here, he will only see some large and small stones, not any buildings at all. Only some special humans can see it. These special humans are called wizards, while ordinary humans are called muggles by these wizards. At this time, a tall man appeared at the entrance of the manor. From the solemn expression on his face as he looked at the manor, it could be seen that he must belong to the type of person who can see the true appearance of the manor, that is, a wizard. The wizard stayed at the door of the manor for a long time, then waved a slender stick as short as a forearm. This was the wand used by wizards, and finally pointed at the manor. A white light emitted from the tip of the wand and disappeared into the manor. The manor seemed to have been lifted off a layer of transparent cloth covering it, and the air began to flow through it, turning into wisps of breeze blowing through the ancient buildings. Then, the wizard held his wand and stepped in. He stepped on the wide road paved with boulders, past a long-dried fountain, past the barren flower beds and lawns, and finally entered the hall of the main building of the manor. In that hall, there is a statue standing impressively. The statue is of a tall man wearing a robe, holding a round shield in his left hand and a long sword in his right hand. The man stood with his head held high and his eyes determined. Looking at this statue, the wizard who just walked in couldn't help but tremble. It's ridiculous. He's just a statue. Why are you still afraid of him? A contemptuous voice echoed in the hall. No, I'm not afraid of him. I'm just... Another slightly deeper voice sounded. Oh, hate him, said the contemptuous voice with a mocking tone. I just don't know what he did for it, and I don't know what those people did for his ideas back then. The deep voice said slowly. Huh, for the world? For wizards? For humans? Ha ha ha. Ridiculous. People should live for themselves. The contemptuous voice became excited. You don't understand. Some people are like this, said the deep voice. Ha ha ha. I don't understand? If I didn't understand, you would have died long ago. We would have died long ago. Stephen, a contemptuous voice laughed. I'm very grateful to you, he said with a sigh in a low voice. If you really want to thank me, then go find those people and find out why they left in the first place, and why we were abandoned. The contemptuous voice said full of hatred. I will, the deep voice said solemnly. Then, the hall fell into a brief silence. What? You don't think you feel the warmth of the world just because you are playing house with a child, right? Stephen, you have to understand that the only people you can rely on in this world are you and me. A disdainful voice becoming a little irritable. Are you afraid of something too? The deep voice asked curiously. I won't be afraid. Never, cried a contemptuous voice. Well, I know you don't. The sounds in the hall disappeared again, and the wizard's figure also disappeared. Only the tall statue was left standing there, motionless and never tired, just like it had been for countless days and nights for thousands of years. Under the statue, there is a long name. If the middle names that represent various meanings are removed, then the name can be abbreviated as Moseth Swinton, a name that is not very famous in the magical world. End of this volume. Pretend there are separate volumes. Dimensional Wall. I have written 67 chapters, which means I have finished writing the first grade of the protagonist, followed by the second grade. Reuniting with the protagonists of the original work will definitely be difficult to write. I guess I will have to find time to read the book again, and then try to balance the original plot with the original plot. Alas, I started to sweat and suddenly became energetic. The weather in many areas has been changeable recently, so please pay attention to your health. Chapter 68. June 16th, Sunday, was the second day after Qin Yu returned to Granger's house. At around 8 o'clock in the morning, Qin Yu and the Granger family were having breakfast. At first, everything seemed peaceful. Then, not long after eating, Mrs. Granger suddenly said, Hermione, there is something that Mother must tell you. What's wrong, Mom? Hermione raised her head blankly and licked her upper lip where some milk had just been stained. Baby, Mommy wants to say. Well, you have grown up, so don't stay in Qin's room for so long at night. Mrs. Granger considered it for a moment and said solemnly, Gah. Hermione was stunned. Ahem. Ahem. Two men present coughed at the same time. One was choking on milk, the other was choking on bread. Hermione, did you go to Qin's room again? Mr. Granger said while coughing. Why did you use the word again, David? Mrs. Granger looked at her husband and asked in confusion. Seeing Mr. Granger speechless, Qin Yu couldn't help but rub his eyebrows. Last night, Hermione did sneak upstairs to his room again and sat next to him on the bed again and talked all night long. Of course, the two were just chatting and didn't even hold hands, because it was summer and Qin Yu didn't need to cover the little girl's hands because of the cold weather. Then, as expected, Hermione fell asleep midway. Qin Yu put her on the bed and sat in a chair to sleep all night. Strictly speaking, he entered a meditative state, which was something he often did. As a result, Hermione was not as panicked the next day as she was last time. She even picked up Qin Yu's quill after getting up and drew two beards on his face. Qin Yu waited until she finished drawing before opening his eyes. After opening her eyes, the girl was so frightened that she hurried downstairs, fearing that she would be punished after being caught by Qin Yu. It seemed that Mrs. Granger noticed something. Aunt Jenny, it was my fault yesterday. Qin Yu quickly admitted his mistake. Out of his instinct to survive, he felt it was better to admit his mistake quickly at this time. Mom, it's not Qin's fault. It's just that I miss him so much, and there are so many things I want to say to him. Hermione followed. Hermione, do you still remember what your mother told you some time ago about medical common sense? Mrs. Granger said seriously, looking into her daughter's eyes. Medical knowledge? Hermione was stunned when she heard this, and then suddenly said, Oh, you mean those about the troubles of adolescence? Adolescence troubles? Qin Yu secretly thought, is this content not suitable for me to listen to? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Mr. Granger sitting opposite. The latter spread his hands and made a meaningful expression to him. Qin Yu had no choice but to sit there upright and swallowed subconsciously. That's right. Do you still remember what your mother told you to pay attention to? Mrs. Granger asked her daughter. Of course I remember. You said that at a certain age, if a boy and a girl have close contact, they will, get pregnant. Hermione replied seriously. Yes. Mrs. Granger nodded with satisfaction. But, You also said that actions like holding hands and kissing will not lead to pregnancy. This is what you told me when I was in 3rd grade. Hermione added solemnly. Wait, have you kissed? Qin. Mr. Granger looked at Qin Yu with sharp eyes. Mrs. Granger also looked over with suspicion. No, Uncle David, Aunt Jenny, I swear, there really isn't. Qin Yu was so shocked that his words were filled with exclamation points. Seeing that Qin Yu didn't look like he was lying, the Grangers and his wife both looked at Hermione again. Well, it's true not. I'm just explaining the medical knowledge you taught me back then, Hermione said calmly. This made the Grangers breathe a sigh of relief. Ahem, so you are still young. So you must not behave in an excessive manner. Do you understand, Qin, Hermione? After Mrs. Granger calmed down, she tried to lead the conversation. Of course not, Aunt Jenny. Qin Yu said seriously. I understand, Mom. Hermione nodded obediently. Well, that's good. I know today's topic is a bit special, but you don't have to be too sensitive. These are just normal human physiological knowledge. In the future, if you have any troubles during your adolescence, if you have any questions, you can talk to me or Dad, and we will definitely listen to your ideas patiently, because we're your closest relatives, Mrs. Granger said softly. Yeah. Qin Yu nodded fiercely. He prayed in his heart that this topic would be over soon. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to eat his breakfast. Got it, Mom. Hermione followed suit. Then, just when the other three felt that this topic could be brought to a satisfactory conclusion, Hermione asked again. So, Mom, is it true that you won't get pregnant if you kiss? Crack. Qin Yu covered his face with one hand and shouted in his heart, Sister, please leave a way for me to survive. David, come here. After thinking for a moment, Mrs. Granger stood up and walked into the kitchen while greeting her husband. Mr. Granger hurried to follow. Children, you eat first. Don't wait for us, Mrs. Granger said to Qin Yu and Hermione before closing the kitchen door. Eat? Can I eat enough? Qin Yu twitched the corners of his mouth and showed a bitter-looking smile. Okay, Mom. Hermione waved happily as if nothing was wrong. Then, the Grangers closed the kitchen door and whispered inside. After finishing the sandwich in her hand, Hermione muttered, Actually, I have already read the books on medicine and physiology. I don't know why my mother suddenly mentioned this. However, the book does not mention anything about kissing. I'm not sure about this either. Maybe I didn't read carefully enough, the little girl said with a slight frown. Well, this is a primary school bully who loves learning and is very serious. After breakfast, the Grangers started a private conversation with Qin Yu and Hermione. Hermione was taken to her small bedroom by Mrs. Granger, while Qin Yu followed Mr. Granger to the couple's large bedroom. As for what Mrs. Granger said to Hermione, Qin Yu had no way of knowing. As soon as he walked into the big bedroom, Mr. Granger went straight to the point and told him about the physiology of the human body and certain behaviors between men and women in a simple and easy-to-understand way. When Mr. Granger talked for a long time and pretended to tear open the packaging of a rubber balloon for demonstration, Qin Yu finally couldn't help but stopped him and said in a pleading tone, Uncle, I really understand. I will definitely not do anything in the future. Well, it seems that you have fully understood the knowledge I talked about, Mr. Granger said with great satisfaction. Yes, I completely understand. Qin Yu nodded quickly. Well, I won't waste this thing, Mr. Granger said, putting the things in his hands into a drawer of the bedside table again. By the way, David Granger probably guessed why his wife mentioned such a topic today. It was because last night, the two of them had an affectionate mutual consolation because they felt that their daughter was drifting away, and discussed the topic of creating a new life. At night, he fell asleep due to exhaustion, and his wife seemed to have gone to the living room to drink a glass of water. It was probably at that time that she noticed the movement upstairs. The combination of these things should have prompted my wife to talk about this topic at the dinner table today. However, the conversation at the dinner table was obviously not very successful, so they decided to have a separate men-to-men, women-to-women conversation. Now it seems that his mission has been completed smoothly. When Mr. Granger came out of the big bedroom holding Qin Yu's shoulders, Hermione and Mrs. Granger were still in the small bedroom. Then, after waiting for nearly half an hour, Granger came out with his daughter. You guys ended it so soon? Jenny Granger looked at her husband and Qin Yu, who were leisurely eating fruit in the living room, and said with some surprise, Yes, our chat went relatively smoothly, right, Qin? Mr. Granger said at the end, looking at Qin Yu with a smile on his face. Yes, Uncle David. Aunt Jenny? Qin Yu said bravely. Well, that's good. Hermione and I also had a great time chatting, Mrs. Granger held her daughter's hand and said with a smile. Hermione's face was flushed. Qin Yu couldn't help shouting in his heart after looking at it. What on earth were you two talking about in the room? I don't know if it's because the Grangers and his wife are both doctors, dentists. They are more open-minded and take sexual issues seriously, and they don't choose to avoid taboos. Therefore, they would talk about it with the two children at the dinner table, and when the conversation reached a deadlock, caused by Hermione, they chose to explain and enlighten the children alone. Overall, the conversation was successful and smooth. At the same time, it also established certain codes of conduct for Qin Yu and Hermione in the future. Well, they didn't do anything extraordinary. This was a small episode at the beginning of the summer vacation. Soon, they were involved in a long list of vacation plans. Dimensional wall. This sprinkle of sugar is a bit evil, but I think it's reasonable, and it has a certain connection with the all-night chat during the Christmas holiday. Then, with the development of the times, both at home and abroad, people attach great importance to sexual education in adolescence. This is a good thing. Young friends who read books, I hope you can view certain changes correctly at this age and stay healthy. Growing up. Blessings from an adult whose youth has passed away, there should be another chapter. Chapter 69. In a somewhat old neighborhood in London, there is an old bookstore. According to the shop owner, Conan Doyle held a book signing here when he published The Final Case. Then, he wrote Sherlock Holmes to death in this book, which immediately received countless letters from readers. He had to bring the blade back to life, and had to resurrect Holmes many years later. Fortunately, in The Final Case, Holmes just fell off the cliff, and it was not that troublesome to resurrection. After that, every new book by Conan Doyle will also be sold in the first batch here. This is the clerk's introduction to the customers. Of course, many people are just watching the fun, and they don't really care whether it is true or not. The most important thing is that the environment of this bookstore is not bad. In addition to the rich and diverse books and newspapers on the shelves, there are also reading areas upstairs and downstairs. Here, order a cup of coffee or juice, find a book you like or dislike, sit by the window or not, and spend a pleasant or unpleasant time. This is probably the purpose of many people coming to this bookstore. After the summer vacation started, the number of customers coming to the store increased significantly, mainly young students. Among these young students, there is a handsome boy with an oriental face and a cute little girl with brown hair. They come every day in the past few days and stay for most of the day. If someone gets close, they will find that they are looking at some well-bound books. The covers and paper of those books look very special. If someone asks them which bookshelf they can find these books, they will smile and be polite. They said it was something they brought themselves, not a book from a bookstore. And if someone stays next to them and listens for a while, you will find that they occasionally say some strange-sounding things, such as the ability of Bezoar to cure hundreds of poisons, the classification of the danger levels of werewolves and vampires, the cause of the elf rebellion, etc. This makes many people think that these two children must be reading some strange and weird fantasy novels. After all, such works have been quite popular in recent years. However, most of the time, they would sit there quietly reading and saying nothing. The little girl will drink a glass of juice and occasionally try coffee, of course, the kind with a lot of milk. After a sip, the rich milk foam will stick to her lips. At this time, the oriental boy sitting opposite her would smile, stretch out a hand, and gently wipe away the foam from her mouth with his thumb. Then, the little girl would give him a sweet smile. They, like many ordinary children here, enjoy reading time. However, no one knows that they are a little different from the other adults and children here, because they are the group of people who exist in the legend, the group of people who can use magic. They are wizards. The two children in the bookstore are, of course, Qin Yu and Hermione. In other words, according to Hermione's long plan, they should have a lot of fun for several days. Moreover, Hermione told Qin Yu that she would be responsible for the expenses of these projects. After Qin Yu heard this, of course he was very happy. After all, how could he refuse to eat soft rice? What's more, eating soft rice from the future Minister of Magic made him feel a little, well, a sense of accomplishment. Author, he too a. The most important thing is that he saw that Hermione was relatively firm on this request, so he naturally had no objection. Anyway, it doesn't matter who spends the money. Then, after 2 days of playing like crazy, Hermione's little coffers were only 1/3 empty. This means that plans cannot keep up with changes. So, they had to delete many expensive projects and choose some affordable ones. Finally, they came to this bookstore. They came here to stay for a while every day, read books, chat, drink some drinks, and eat some desserts. It was quite nice. The reason why he did this is because Qin Yu wanted to accompany Hermione and enjoy life in the Muggle world again. After all, after she entered the magical world, she would probably have a different state of mind and basically stay away from the past life. This is more or less a kind of remembrance of the passing time, right? Qin Yu thought to himself. Qin, I've spent all my money. Hermione sighed. Huh, so fast? Isn't there still more than 10 pounds? Qin Yu said with some surprise. It was true that there were so many before, but the desserts in this bookstore are pretty good, so we ate a little too much, Hermione said, unable to help but swallow. Well, their desserts are indeed quite delicious. Qin Yu nodded in agreement. Then, he closed the parchment book in his hand, stood up slowly, and whispered to Hermione. Then, my dear princess, you are already penniless. Come with me next. Saying this, Qin Yu stretched out a hand to the little girl. Hearing this, Hermione shrugged helplessly, then closed her book and handed her hand to the broad and powerful palm. Okay, my prince. The conversation and actions between the two made the guests next to them smile for a while, thinking that these two children were quite cute. Qin Yu and Hermione packed their things and left the ancient bookstore. Well, the old bookstore of the Muggle world. In order to have fun and experience life in the Muggle world, Qin Yu did not take Hermione to some places in the magical world, such as Diagon Alley. Now that Hermione's money has been spent, Qin Yu allows the little girl to say goodbye to her past life. So, Diagon Alley became their first destination. Because, whether it is the textbooks and school supplies Qin Yu needs for second grade, or the items on the list included with Hermione's first grade admission notice, they all need to go to Diagon Alley to purchase. Therefore, the next day, Qin Yu and Hermione went to Diagon Alley together. This was also the second time they came here together. They passed through the bar of the Leaky Cauldron and came to the patio. Qin Yu tapped the magical wall with his wand. When a large doorway was revealed in the wall, he pulled Hermione and walked in. The second time she came to Diagon Alley, Hermione was much more familiar with the roads. At least they know where to buy a cauldron, where to buy books, where to buy robes, and where to buy magic pets, the same house where they wanted to send Crookshanks out. Shop. Well, it was in that magic pet store that they met a chubby little boy, and an old man took him to buy a toad. Qin Yu greeted him warmly and asked if he was also a freshman at Hogwarts this year. Hello, my name is Neville Longbottom. I will go to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in September this year. The little boy nervously introduced himself to Qin Yu and Hermione. Qin Yu and Hermione also introduced themselves and said they were looking forward to meeting him at Hogwarts. Then, after a brief chat, Neville followed the old grandfather and left. Qin Yu and Hermione continued shopping. You can read more daily new novels on. Both sites share the same login details, so you don't need to sign up again. Chapter 70. Qin Yu was somewhat surprised to meet Neville here. Neville's life is really hard. It can be said to be comparable to Harry Potter's. When Neville was 1 year old, his father, Frank Longbottom, and his mother, Alice Longbottom, who were members of the Order of the Phoenix fighting against Voldemort, were kidnapped by Death Eaters and tortured to madness with the Cruciatus Curse. So much so that the two have spent more than 10 years at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and magical injuries. The little Neville was raised by his grandmother Augusta Longbottom, probably because he witnessed the tragedy of his parents when he was a child and was cast a forgetting curse. Neville has been very forgetful since he was a child and has always been a dull and introverted person, a slow responsive child, and was even suspected by family members to be a squib, a descendant of a wizard without magic. What's more damaging is that his Uncle Algie and Great Aunt test Neville's magical talent from time to time, such as pushing him off the lakeside dock or throwing him down from the second-floor window, just for show. I wanted to throw it, but then I missed it and threw it down. The child was really miserable. Fortunately, Neville is indeed not a squib, otherwise he would be disabled or dead. According to the original timeline, after entering school, Neville did not have much talent in magic learning, and even struggled. Herbology was just okay. However, he continued to grow during his several years of school career, and finally relied on his own courage. Obtained the recognition of the Sword of Gryffindor, and slew Voldemort's seventh Horcrux, the beautiful Snake Nagini, with his sword. The Horcrux was roughly equivalent to an opportunity for resurrection, which also cleared the way for Harry Potter to finally defeat Voldemort. The last obstacle. Therefore, Neville is also revered as Sword Master Neville and Snake-Slaying Swordmaster by many people. Well, these are informal titles, probably similar to the best kid in the world for Dudley, Harry's cousin. Thinking about the name Swordmaster, and thinking about the chubby-faced little boy he just saw, Qin Yu couldn't help but smile. Qin, What are you so happy about? Hermione noticed this and asked curiously. Well, I was thinking about the kid named Neville just now. I think he will definitely become a very accomplished person in the future. Qin Yu said seriously. Really? Why didn't I see it? Are you talking about the mysterious divination from the East? When Hermione got interested, she moved her little face forward and said expectantly, then look at me and tell me what kind of person I will become in the future. Immediately, Qin Yu held the girl's little face, carefully looked at her facial features, 3 stops, and 12 palace positions, and finally said seriously, you will become a great person in the future. How amazing! Hermione wanted him to elaborate. Probably one person is better than 10,000 people. Qin Yu thought for a while and said, it sounds very powerful. What does it do? Hermione continued to ask. Probably, like the Minister of Magic, Qin Yu said. Really? Hermione's beautiful eyes widened as she listened. Of course it's true. If you don't succeed, you can come to me, Qin Yu said for sure. Hermione pulled her little face out of Qin Yu's big hand, thought about it, and suddenly asked curiously, isn't the Minister of Magic the highest position in the wizarding world? Is there anyone above him? Obviously, the primary school bully is very serious and still has doubts about the phrase, one person is inferior to 10,000 people. Of course there is. Isn't there the International Federation of Wizards above the Ministry of Magic? The chairman of the International Federation of Wizards is the person above the Minister of Magic. Qin Yu found a reasonable explanation. Oh, that's it. Hermione probably imagined the future of being the Minister of Magic, with a happy smile on her face. Then, probably to comfort Qin Yu, she patted his shoulder and said seriously, Qin, I think you will become a more powerful person than me. If I become the Minister of Magic, then you will definitely become the chairman of the Wizards Federation. Well, in just a short time, the two of them had divided up the 2 most powerful positions in the magical world. Qin Yu smiled and rubbed her head and said angrily, Okay, wake up. We should go buy robes. I'm just imagining it, Hermione said with a smile. Then, she took Qin Yu's hand and walked to Mrs. Malkin's robe store. We need 3 black plain work robes, a black winter cloak, and a pair of dragon leather gloves. Qin, what are dragon leather gloves? Hermione read the text on the item list and then asked Qin curiously, You actually don't have to worry about this. As long as the people in this store know that you are a first-year student at Hogwarts, they will help you choose everything. Qin Yu said to the little girl. That's great. This reassured Hermione. Then, the two quickly walked into the store that specialized in making clothes for wizards. Welcome. Do you want to buy Hogwarts school uniforms? A short, fat, and smiling witch said. This is the owner of this store, Mrs. Malkin. Yes, Mrs. Malkin, but I bought it last year, and my sister is here to buy it today. Qin Yu pushed little Hermione forward. The little girl turned back and made a face at him, whispering, Sister. You are Crookshank's uncle? This is nothing. Qin Yu couldn't help but scratch her nose. Oh, I remember. You were the little boy from the East last year. You came here alone, if I remember correctly, Mrs. Malkin recalled. There were some little wizards who came to buy clothes alone, but it was rare to see a calm child like the little Oriental boy in front of her, so Mrs. Malkin quickly recalled it. Yes, you remember correctly. In fact, someone came with me last time, but he had something to do and left, Qin Yu said with a shrug. Well, in order to handle the consignment of the 3-headed dog Luwei, Hagrid asked Qin Yu to go shopping by himself. Well, this beautiful young lady, let's go inside and measure the size. Don't worry, it will be fine soon, Mrs. Malkin said to Hermione. So, Hermione followed Mrs. Malkin to the fitting area in the back of the store. Qin Yu was sitting in a rest area in the front store, drinking tea brought by the clerk, the witch lady, who thoughtfully gave him a plate of chocolate biscuits. After a while, after Qin Yu drank 2 cups of tea and finished the plate of cookies, Hermione walked out of the back hall. Hermione was now dressed differently than before. She was wearing a white shirt underneath, a red and yellow scarf, and a loose and decent black robe outside. The scarf and the like should have been matched by Madame Malkin, and in her hand she waved a thin wooden ruler, probably serving as a magic wand. That look is smart and cute. How is it? Does it look good? The little girl asked her companions who were sitting there in a daze with a smile. It looks good. Qin Yu nodded and said, I mean, clothes, the little girl said with a slight blush on her face. What I said also includes clothes, Qin Yu said solemnly. I'll ask Mrs. Malkin to adjust the sleeves again. They're too long. The little girl stammered and quickly returned to the back hall. Chapter 71. Beautiful clothes are always a favorite for little girls. After Hermione tried on the wizard uniform, she looked at it in front of the mirror for a long time before finally reluctantly taking it off and letting Madame Malkin put it on. It was really not suitable to wear it all the time now. Then, Qin Yu and Hermione left the robe shop carrying the set of clothes. Then, the two went straight to Ollivander's wand shop. Qin Yu was very familiar with this store, not only because he came to buy a wand once, but also because he had written several letters to Mr. Ollivander in order to promote the high-quality unicorns produced by Hogwarts. Animal hair and phoenix feathers. Of course, Mr. Ollivander did not buy the latter thing, but only bought a large amount of unicorn hair. Currently, the sales of wands made of phoenix feathers are not very good, because there are not many wizards suitable for using wands made of this material. This was Mr. Ollivander's explanation in his letter. Although Qin Yu was a little disappointed, he didn't press too hard. After all, it was not an easy task to pick up Phoenix Fox's feathers. Later, he heard that Professor Swinton used phoenix feathers to make the sword given to him. At that time, he was actually curious about how the other party got it and wanted to learn some experience, but he never had time to ask. Ding dong. The ancient wooden door was pushed open and the bell on the door rang, disturbing the quiet atmosphere in the store. Two young guests came in. The most eye-catching thing about this ancient shop is the long and narrow wooden box that almost reaches the ceiling, and there seems to be some mysterious atmosphere hidden in the wooden box. Looking at those mysterious wooden boxes, Hermione felt inexplicably frightened and subconsciously squeezed Qin Yu's hand. When she felt the power from that big hand, she felt a little relieved. "Good morning, children," a soft voice sounded. This made Hermione flinch back. At this time, an old man with big eyes appeared in front of them. His very light eyes seemed to be shining in the dim shop. "Good morning, Mr. Ollivander." Qin Yu greeted the other party with a smile. "Oh, Qin, I remember you. The unicorn hair you asked Hagrid to send is pretty good," Mr. Ollivander said with a smile. "Well, as long as you are satisfied." Qin Yu nodded and said, "Okay, miss, if I guess correctly, you are going to buy a wand today, right?" Mr. Ollivander looked at Hermione. "Yes, it's me, Mr. Ollivander," Hermione said solemnly. "Then, let's measure the size first." Mr. Ollivander said this and took out his automatic tape measure. "Do you need to measure the size when buying a wand?" Hermione asked Qin Yu in a low voice. "Well, everyone's physical characteristics and usage habits are different, and the length of the wand will also be different." Qin Yu explained simply. "That's right. Whether you use your left hand or your right hand, your height, weight, arm length, sight distance, etc. will all affect the use of the wand. Therefore, you must understand these in advance so that I can choose the right wand for you." Mr. Ollivander was more professional than Qin Yu. Hermione finally understood what was going on and raised her arm in response to the automatic paper. So Mr. Ollivander quickly measured the dimensions. Then he went to look in those boxes. Not long after, he came down from the ladder with one of them, and after opening it, he took out a wand from it and handed it to Hermione. 10 3/4 inches, grapevine wood dragon heartstring, the heart nerve of the fire dragon, wand core. Dragon heartstring can cast powerful and gorgeous magic, and it can also allow the owner to learn magic faster. "I think it should be suitable for you." Hermione heard this and took the thin stick-like thing with a solemn expression. However, only she knew how excited she was now. Ever since she learned her identity as a wizard, Hermione had longed to have a wand of her own one day. Later, Qin Yu started school a year earlier than her and had a wand in advance, but he refused to let her touch it. Qin would never be so stingy with anything other than wands. However, Hermione could also understand that, after all, she was still too young, and it would not be wise to come into contact with something as powerful and dangerous as a wand in advance. Now that she has reached school age, she can finally have her own wand. Holding the tan wand, Hermione felt as if she could feel some power flowing there, and she seemed to be able to hear some kind of sound coming from it. The first time she held the wand, she was sure that it was the wand that belonged to her. The wand that belonged to Hermione Jane Granger. She raised her wand slightly, and a beam of fiery light emitted from the tip. "Wow, it seems I was right. This wand is indeed the best for you," Mr. Ollivander said happily. "Thank you, Mr. Ollivander." Hermione held the precious wand in both hands and bowed to Mr. Ollivander to thank her. She knew that Mr. Ollivander not only sold a wand, he also chose a partner for himself, the most suitable partner. Then, Qin Yu simply paid 7 galleons to Mr. Ollivander. Before leaving, the latter stopped Qin Yu again, helped him check the wand with a silver willow unicorn hair core, and replaced it with a high-quality unicorn hair for free, and replaced the wand with some of the flagging core of the staff was replaced. You use it too often. Be kind to it, Mr. Ollivander finally warned. Hearing this, Qin Yu touched his nose awkwardly. In the past year, he was really good at using this wand. He was shot down by Professor Snape countless times during the battle. Moreover, when he was trying out the basilisk before the holidays, he was shot down several times by Professor Snape. I nearly broke my wand once. I will, Mr. Ollivander, Qin Yu said seriously. However, you still have to use it when it's time to use it. After all, the wand is used to protect yourself, Mr. Ollivander continued. Well, you have already said it. What else can I say? Qin Yu thought to himself. After buying the robe and wand, the rest was easier. Qin Yu took Hermione to pick out telescopes, brass scales, crystal vials, etc., and of course, the most important textbooks. They spent a long time shopping at Flourish and Blott's bookstore, not only buying first-grade and second-grade magic textbooks, but also some other reference books. When Qin Yu paid again and the two of them walked out of the bookstore, Hermione finally couldn't help but ask, Qin, did you spend a lot of money this time? This time she came to Diagon Alley. She had a certain understanding of the prices in the magical world, and knew that the things she bought this time were definitely worth a lot of money. Huh. Qin Yu was stunned when he heard this, then showed a smile that he thought was very handsome, and said to the little girl, Did I tell you that I made a lot of money in the past year? It seems like, no. Hermione shook her head. Well, if you don't, then you won't. In short, we are a family. The money I earn is your money. You can spend as much as you want. Qin Yu said very grandly. Yeah. Hermione smiled and nodded. She liked Qin's words, we are a family, very much. So, the little girl impolitely begged Qin Yu to buy her an ice cream, the kind with a lot of chopped nuts. Chapter 72. After the two of them finished eating the ice cream they bought from Florin's cold drink shop, they went to the last stop of the trip, Patchy's Crucible Shop. This store is the first store at the entrance to Diagon Alley, so they went there last. After buying a pewter crucible, Qin Yu and Hermione ended their trip to Diagon Alley today. Note, pewter, tone wax, tin lead alloy, silver-like pewter gun tip. By storing bulky items in the Swinton glove pocket, they won't have to worry about buying too much. After passing through that magical wall, going around the bar counter of the Leaky Cauldron, and then passing through the lobby of the bar, the two of them opened the door and walked out, once again entering the Muggle world outside. Or in other words, wizards and Muggles living together. World. Standing at the door of the Leaky Cauldron, the two of them paused for a moment. Hermione looked back at the dilapidated bar, and then at the people on the street. Her eyes showed a bit of confusion and helplessness at a certain moment. However, when she looked at the boy holding her hand beside her, her eyes became soft and firm. Yes, he is there. Qin, let's go home, Hermione said with a smile. Well, go home. Qin Yu nodded and said. On the subway ride back, the little girl was so tired that she suddenly lost her voice while chatting with Qin Yu, and fell asleep with her head on his shoulder. Then, because it was really uncomfortable to sleep while sitting up, Hermione kept changing positions between half asleep and half awake along the way. It was all kinds of weird. At one point, she even sat on Qin Yu's lap and hugged his neck and fell asleep for several stops. When she woke up, she slipped out of him with a blushing face and sat next to him obediently. As for Hermione's sleeping position, of course Qin Yu can do anything, as long as her legs are numb at most. After returning from Diagon Alley, their summer vacation life began to turn to magic learning. There was no way, who made Hermione determined to become the top student in the entire grade after school started. Of course, Qin Yu is completely competent in tutoring Hermione, and can even be said to be very meticulous. After Hermione got the grapevine wand, she had always wanted to try it. Then, she begged Qin Yu to teach her a few tricks. Qin Yu thought about it, and chose a few simple spells to teach Hermione. After he taught Hermione step by step how to wave the wand, the little girl learned quickly and mastered the simple spells in no time. However, if he wanted to learn something new again, even if Hermione tried to act coquettishly by holding his arm, Qin Yu would not teach him anymore. You can learn a few simple ones. If you use magic spells frequently, I'm worried that someone from the Ministry of Magic will come to your door. Qin Yu pinched her pouting face and said, Well, okay. The little girl had to give up, because she knew that although Qin was very kind to her, he was indeed a very principled person and would not always follow her in everything. For example, sometimes she wanted to stay in his room for a while at night, but he would always push her out. As long as we don't keep thinking about kissing, that's what my mother told me, Hermione once told Qin Yu. However, the latter still insisted that she go back to her bedroom quickly. As everyone knows, after hearing her words, Qin Yu has been curious about mother-in-law. What on earth did Aunt Ginny say to Hermione that day? Since she couldn't use magic, Hermione had to read the books. One day in July, while she was lying on the sofa reading a reference book, she suddenly rubbed her toes against Qin Yu next to her and said curiously, "Qin, who is Harry Potter? Is he very powerful? I have seen this name in the two books, Modern History of Magic and The Rise and Fall of Dark Magic before, and he is also mentioned in this book today." At this time, Qin Yu was looking through the long letters written by Elvis to him. The child had already written several letters in a row. Qin Yu was slightly stunned by Hermione's words. He pulled open the girl's restless feet and saw that she was holding a book titled Important Magical Events of the 20th Century in her hand. Regarding Hermione's question, Qin Yu thought for a while and said slowly, "Harry Potter. How to put it? He is indeed a very key figure in certain events, but he is not a powerful, or not as magical as people usually think. On the contrary, he is just an ordinary wizard child at the moment. Even life is worse than that of ordinary wizard children." Qin Yu added another sentence silently in his heart. "Oh, that's it. How old is he now? Where is he?" This information is not detailed in the book. Hermione continued to ask. "He should have just turned 11 this year. If nothing unexpected happens, he should enter school in September this year." Qin Yu said to her, "Wow, isn't that the same grade as me? I didn't expect that there is a celebrity in the book in the same grade as me," Hermione said with some excitement. Hermione naturally feels great about characters that can appear in books. She feels that if she can also appear in books, then she will definitely read all the books that mention her. What's wrong with celebrities? I'm also a celebrity at Hogwarts, okay? Qin Yu said with amusement. Hee, I know, Qin is our king. As Hermione said this, she sat up and raised her hands in a cheering gesture. Then, she leaned forward unexpectedly and kissed Qin Yu on the cheek. Qin Yu's originally somewhat dissatisfied expression immediately disappeared. Seeing such changes, the little girl felt as if she had found some way to change Qin's mood, and secretly wrote it down. Ahem, I'm going to write a reply to Elvis. You have a good time reading. Qin Yu cleared his throat and said as he stood up. I want to go too. Hermione dropped the book in her hand, pulled on her slippers and followed. Hermione felt a little angry about the guy who wrote to Qin every now and then, because she had clearly written the most letters to Qin before. Of course, now that they are together every day, there is no need to write letters, but she still feels that someone is threatening her position in Qin's heart. The most important thing is that the man named Elvis will mention many magic problems learned in the first grade in the letter, and Qin will answer them one by one. Hermione was very interested in Qin's answers because they were of great help to her study. For various reasons, she often stayed aside while Qin Yu wrote replies, and asked about things she didn't understand from time to time. Hermione's questions also made Qin Yu revise and improve certain contents from time to time, making the letter 1/3 longer than normal. I think you can definitely sign your name in the reply, Qin Yu said jokingly once. In replying this time, Hermione also asked a lot of questions. Then, after the two of them finished writing the letter, the sun had already set. Not long after the sun set, Qin Yu received another letter, and this letter was from Hagrid. Dimensional Wall. There is one more chapter. Please vote for free small gifts. If you have enough balance to send flowers after reminder, if you have any balance, please give it to me. Thank you. Chapter 73. Surrey is located in southeast England, southwest of London. The River Thames passes through here and flows northeast to Greater London. At number 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey, there is an ordinary-looking single-family house. The Dursleys lived in this house. Many times, everyone thinks that there are only 3 members in their family, Mr. Dursley, Mrs. Dursley, and their son Dudley Dursley. However, those who really know their family will know that there is a 4th person in their family, an 11-year-old boy wearing glasses. And this little boy with no sense of existence is the son of Mrs. Dursley's sister Lily, her nephew, Harry Potter. It was obvious that Harry Potter's life at his aunt's house was not a happy one. Not only does he have little presence in the eyes of outsiders, he doesn't even have a decent bedroom at home and can only live in a storage room under the stairs. Not only that, every aspect of his life was completely different from his cousin Dudley. Because he is a child whose parents died in a car accident, and his cousin Dudley is the best child in the world in the eyes of his aunt and uncle. Every time he thought of his aunt's description of Dudley, Harry wanted to laugh, because only he knew how bad Dudley was. Cousin Dudley not only bullied him himself, but also bullied him with a group of companions. How can such a person deserve the evaluation of the best child in the world? Harry felt that he was probably the unluckiest person in the world. He wanted to grow up as soon as possible, be independent as soon as possible, and leave this home that was not friendly to him as soon as possible. Or, this is not his home. Who is that boy? Harry murmured as he lay on his narrow bed. He often thinks of that trip to the zoo. When visiting the reptile house, he somehow suddenly made the glass of the python cabinet disappear, and then the python sneaked out. At that time, many people were frightened and ran around. Only a boy who looked slightly older than himself had the courage to move closer. Moreover, Harry could clearly see and hear the boy communicating with the python, and he could understand the meaning of the boy's words. That day, Harry really wanted to talk to the boy, because he felt that he and the boy should have a lot in common, and he was extremely eager to find someone with whom he could share the secrets in his heart. Unfortunately, Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia were furious and took him away because they thought Harry had let the boa constrictor go and thrown their precious son into the boa constrictor. In fact, after that day, Harry secretly bought a ticket and took the bus and subway to go to the zoo in London. However, he waited for a long time without seeing the little boy. Of course, he knew it was stupid, but he had no other choice. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia soon found out about sneaking away to the zoo, which made them furious. Not surprisingly, he was locked in the stairs storage room for the whole day. He was very sad at the time. Not because he was locked in a dark and narrow room again, but because he felt that he might never find that boy again in this life, and never find anyone who could listen to his secrets. People. The saddest thing for a person is not hunger, cold, or darkness, but having no companions around him. Tears flowed silently down Harry's cheeks as he thought of this. Haha, Harry, you are going to Stonewall Middle School after the summer vacation. I heard that they will press the new students' heads into the toilet, Dudley said in a loud voice. After saying this, seeing that Harry had no reaction, Dudley added with a smirk, "Would you like to go to the bathroom now and let me help you get used to it in advance?" Harry took a deep breath, calmed down, and said slowly, "No, of course, if you want to experience it yourself and describe it to me, I will be happy to hear your feelings." Before Dudley's stupid head could understand what he said, Harry ran away and went to a nearby park. Sitting on the swing in the park, Harry Potter thought about his own thoughts. He had finished primary school, and after the summer vacation, he would go to middle school, and his aunt and uncle arranged for him to go to a comprehensive middle school, which was what Dudley called Stonewall Middle School. This middle school had a bad reputation, and Harry felt that if he went there, he would only continue the fate of being bullied. No, it is possible to be bullied even more severely. This made him increasingly pessimistic about the future. He was somewhat unwilling to accept this, because Dudley was going to a well-known local middle school, Smelting Middle School. But what can he do? He has no parents and no money, so he cannot have his own ideas. Thinking about these things, he went home very late. And when he returned home, Dudley and Aunt Petunia also came back from London. "Look, Harry, how does my uniform look like?" Dudley put on a black tuxedo and held a knobby cane, showing off. This was the required dress code at Smelting High School, where Dudley was going. After saying this, he started walking back and forth in the room. His fat body, wearing such a uniform, looked even more ridiculous. Both Uncle Vernon Dursley and Aunt Petunia Dursley were so excited, so happy and proud of their baby son that the aunt almost cried. Harry, who was originally in a bad mood, now wanted to laugh a little because he felt that Dudley now looked like a circus gorilla. Suddenly, he no longer envied Dudley, who could go to Smelting Middle School, because he was happier to be farther away from the gorilla. That night, Harry had a dream. In the dream, the boy he saw at the zoo came to him in a helicopter, and after jumping out of the helicopter, he shouted to him, "Harry Potter, your country needs you." At that moment, he saw the surprised expressions of Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, and Dudley was so surprised that his eyes nearly fell out of his head, with jealousy and envy written all over his fat face. Then, he woke up happy. After waking up, Harry's excitement couldn't calm down for a long time. Helicopters are the most powerful thing he can think of. This is what he saw in one of Dudley's comic books. He felt that there should be no cooler way to appear than this. But, after all, this was just his imagination in his dream. How could it be true? Only in dreams can such things happen. Thinking of this, Harry quickly closed his eyes, wanting to continue the dream and wondering where the boy would take him. However, until dawn and Aunt Petunia's sharp voice sounded, he could not have that dream again. This morning, Harry finished breakfast in a somewhat disappointed mood. Soon after, he helped his uncle pick up the mail. However, he unexpectedly discovered that one of the envelopes read, "Mr. Harry Potter receives." Moreover, the address written on the letter was, "The storage room under the stairs, For Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey, who would go out of their way to include storage room under the stairs in their address. So, this letter is really for him? Harry thought about that dream again, and his heartbeat inexplicably became faster. Chapter 74. After Harry opened the yellow envelope, but before he could open the letter written on the parchment, Uncle Vernon roughly snatched the letter away. After reading the contents of the letter, Uncle Vernon seemed to be frightened by something terrible and ran to the kitchen to find his wife Petunia. Then, for probably the first time in their lives, they rejected Dudley's request. Dudley was particularly curious about what the letter to Harry looked like. Harry was also confused about this, but it made him even more curious, because he felt that Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia must be hiding something from him. Otherwise, they wouldn't be hiding in the kitchen. He muttered things like, "We are being watched and those people are watching us." Who were those people? Harry wanted to know. "That letter is mine," Harry said, scratching his neck. After Uncle Vernon came home from get-off work in the evening. "Haha, no one wrote to you. It's because the address was wrong," Uncle Vernon said with a cold snort. "The address clearly says storage room under the stairs." "That's the letter for me." Harry was not easily fooled. "Then you don't live there anymore. Pack your things and move to the small bedroom upstairs," Uncle Vernon said loudly. For the next 6 days, Uncle Vernon was like crazy, trying every means to intercept the letters addressed to Harry, but no matter how hard Harry tried to grab them, he couldn't get even a corner of the letter paper. At first, the letters were just put in the mailbox, waiting for them to pick them up. After Uncle Vernon picked up a few letters, he nailed the mailbox shut. However, the next day, more letters came through the cracks in the door and windows, and once even appeared in Aunt Petunia's opened raw eggs. So much so that, at one point, 30 or 40 letters flew in from the fireplace like bats. This made Uncle Vernon completely angry and completely crazy. In order to avoid the constant delivery of letters, he drove his family to a faraway city and stayed in a hotel. This, of course, had no effect. The next day, the landlady told them that the front desk had received 100 letters, all signed to Harry Potter. In the end, Uncle Vernon, overwhelmed by anger and fear, rode for several hours and took his family to a rock in the sea and lived in the only broken wooden house on the rock. Now, Harry was wrapped in a thin, torn, damp quilt and lying on a fairly flat floor. Outside, there was a violent storm. "Probably, no one will send me letters," Harry thought with some disappointment as he listened to the movement outside the house. Tonight, Harry didn't feel sleepy. In addition to looking forward to reading the contents of those letters, he was still waiting for midnight to come. Because, after tonight, he will be 11 years old. Harry glanced at the watch on Dudley's wrist and knew that the time was slowly approaching 0. So, he drew a cake on the thick, dusty floor with his fingers and wrote the words "Happy Birthday, Harry Potter" on it. The rain and wind continued to rage outside. Harry stared at Dudley's watch, silently counting down the time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "Happy birthday, Harry Potter," he said softly to himself. For some reason, when he said this, he suddenly smiled. Yes, no matter the storm, no matter the bullying and ridicule of others, he is growing up little by little, and no one can stop him from becoming another year older. Even if no one remembers his birthday except himself, no one says happy birthday to him. However, at this moment, Harry suddenly heard 2 people talking outside in the violent storm. Among them, one voice sounded a little immature, like a child, and the other voice was muffled, but loud, like a very large adult. Although the storm is particularly atmospheric, this weather is really unpleasant, the child complained in a voice. "I didn't know they would choose this place." "That boy Dursley is really good at choosing places," said a muffled voice. "By the way, I'm curious as to how the school knew about this place," the child said in a confused voice. "I don't know. I followed the address on the admission notice. Look, the sea, the hut on the rock, the floor. It should be right," the muffled voice continued. "It seems that our protagonist today is quite miserable. He actually slept on the floor." The child's voice sighed. Hearing this, Harry's eyes widened in surprise, because he probably guessed who the 2 people outside were talking about. "Okay, let's not be too long-winded. Let's go in and get warm at least," the child said in a somewhat anxious voice. I'll knock on the door," a muffled voice said. "What are you knocking on? Just open it." "I'll do it." After the child's voice finished speaking, Harry heard a loud B************ G sound on the wooden door of the cabin. However, the door did not open. Harry was stunned for a moment, considering whether to open the door. Well, I can't handle this door without a wand and a sword, so you should do it, the child's voice said in annoyance. After saying this, the voice added, also, we agreed before that I want to be the first to go in. Well, no problem, you stay away first, the muffled voice said. Then, Harry heard a sound like a giant hammer slamming into the door, and he even felt the entire wooden house shaking. Obviously, Harry's guess was correct. That muffled voice must be a big man. Such a loud noise naturally woke up the other 3 people in the room. Uncle Vernon hurriedly picked up a rifle and shouted at the people outside who were hammering on the wooden door. Don't come in, I have a gun. I really know how to shoot. It was quiet outside for a while, but there was another crash. With a harsh creaking sound, the hinges of the wooden door were knocked off, and then, with a bang, the wooden door fell to the ground. And the next scene, Harry never forgot it in the countless days and nights that followed. It was still vivid in his mind. After the wooden door fell to the ground, a boy wearing a black robe and a red and yellow scarf walked in. He carried a long sword behind him and was playing with a thin silver-gray wooden stick in his hand. The strong wind outside the house blew in, blowing his robes and making his hair a little messy. However, there was always a vague smile on his lips. He looked at Harry, who looked astonished, and the first thing he said was, Harry Potter, are you ready to come to another world? In countless midnight dreams, every time he thought of this sentence, Harry felt hot emotions overflowing in his heart, making him burst into tears. He is not sad, but happy. There was no helicopter in his dream that day, and there were no heroic words, but he felt that this scene was the coolest scene he had ever seen in his life. Is he ready to go to another world? He doesn't know. However, he is looking forward to following the boy in front of him to a new world. Dimensional wall. Let me tell you, I have been thinking about the scene in this chapter recently. I originally thought I could write something cool, but in the end I could only write it like this. Anyway, as long as the meaning is fulfilled, don't ask too much of me. My level is only about this. No more talking, let's move on to the next chapter. I want to be a second watcher. Chapter 75. To be honest, Qin Yu had been thinking about the words he came up with for a long time. However, in the end, I only chose the sentence, Harry Potter, are you ready to come to another world? Another world, of course, refers to the magical world. This seems to have opened a door to a new world for this child. Qin Yu once discussed with Hagrid seriously. Oh, that's good. Hagrid just nodded perfunctorily, not understanding Qin Yu's intention at all. By the way, Qin Yu received a letter from Hagrid that evening. The letter said that he was going to send an admission notice to a first-year freshman and asked Qin Yu if he would like to accompany him. Qin Yu calculated the time and happily agreed. Then, he met up with Hagrid and came to the reef together on a stormy night. Hermione, that's right, readers, this guy didn't take me with him and left me alone at home, him, of course, at such an important moment. How could Qin Yu miss the opportunity to show off his elegance as a student at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry? So, he put on his college uniform, put on his sword on his back, and naturally had a wand in his hand. So he completed the whole outfit. He originally wanted to wear a pair of sunglasses, but considering that the sunglasses were too unconventional and did not fit the image of the magical world, he did not take them out. In short, when he stepped on the fallen wooden door and walked in, at that moment, he felt that he should be very stylish. However, he had to admit that it really took a lot of perseverance to say those words while being pointed at by Mr. Dursley with a rifle. Hagrid. Qin Yu couldn't help but call Uncle Hagrid. Hagrid finally understood what Qin Yu said this time, walked over, grabbed the barrel of the rifle, and bent it directly. Vernon Dursley was startled by the giant's actions and subconsciously pulled the trigger, but the bullet shot straight down the curved barrel and into the ceiling. This scene directly frightened the Dursley family. Mr. Dursley, we come here with no ill intentions, so why are you so excited? Why don't we sit down and have a calm chat? Qin Yu said, and the old man calmly sat on the sofa in the room. His calmness only made Mr. and Mrs. Dursley feel even more furious, because they knew that the calmer someone was, the more ruthless they would be. It's definitely because I watched too many movies. Please get out. You are breaking into a private house. Mr. Dursley said sternly. Come on, Dursley. If you didn't stop those letters, why would we be here? As Hagrid said this, he leaned over and picked up the door panel and blocked the doorway again. In this way, the storm cannot come in. Then, he took his umbrella and sneaked close to the fireplace. After a while, a raging fire burned there, and the room quickly became warm and dry. After doing this, he blinked at Qin Yu several times, signaling the latter not to tell others about his use of magic. Of course, Qin Yu understood what he meant, smiled helplessly, and nodded at him subtly. Harry, this is the birthday gift we prepared for you. Qin Yu took out a cake box. None of the Dursleys present could see where he took it out. Happy 11th birthday. Qin Yu opened the box and saw Happy Birthday to Harry Potter written on the cake. Harry, don't go there, Uncle Vernon said sternly. Harry looked at his panicked uncle's family, pursed his lips, and finally walked to the Oriental boy with firm steps and sat on the sofa with him. I've seen you before, Harry whispered. Oh, that time at the zoo? Qin Yu raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect the child to still remember that incident. Yeah. Harry nodded happily. The so-called once for life, twice for maturity is applicable all over the world. After confirming that they had met before, Harry naturally felt very close to the slightly older boy in front of him. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Qin Yu. You can call me Qin, Qin Yu said and stretched out his right hand. Hello, Qin. Nice to meet you. Harry also stretched out his hand and shook Qin Yu's hand excitedly. At this moment, he felt as if he was in a dream. The zoo boy he had been looking forward to seeing again day and night really appeared in front of him today, and in a way he had never expected. Moreover, it seems to have some kind of mission. Oh, by the way, Hagrid, where is Harry's admission notice? Qin Yu also thought of the purpose of their trip. Let me look for it. Hagrid groped around on his body and quickly found a light yellow envelope. No, we don't agree. If he goes to that school, I won't give him a penny, Vernon Dursley said angrily. When Qin Yu heard this, he rolled his eyes and thought to himself, do you need to give me money? Gringotts has a vault of money waiting for Harry to inherit it. Okay, Mr. Dursley, do you think we are here just to listen to your nagging? Qin Yu said sadly. When appropriate, it is necessary to use some threatening means. Mrs. Dursley was immediately frightened and hid behind Mr. Dursley, who was shaking uncontrollably. While Qin Yu was speaking, Harry Potter also finished reading the letter, with confusion on his face. Yes, we are wizards, you are also a wizard, and your parents are also wizards. Your Aunt Petunia didn't tell you this, probably for some purpose of protecting you, but I must say, this kind of thinking is stupid. The world will not become safer because you are an ostrich with your head buried in the sand, Qin Yu said in a calm tone. I didn't protect him. I hate him. I hate my freak sister. The moment I found out she was a witch, I had a premonition that she would explode one day. Petunia Dursley said angrily said. Explosion? You said before that my parents died in a car accident? Harry said in disbelief. Car accident? How could the car accident hurt Lily and James? It was Hagrid's turn to be angry. Hagrid, I think we should talk about Harry's life experience later. Qin Yu stopped Hagrid's next words. Then, he said to Harry Potter, Harry, Hogwarts is a magic school that trains wizards. There are excellent teachers and perfect educational concepts here. In 7 years, you will become an excellent wizard. Will you accept this offer of admission? Of course I do. Harry nodded solemnly. This magic school called Hogwarts is at least many times better than the Stonewall High School he is going to. If Qin Yu knew that this kid was comparing Hogwarts to a rubbish school like Stonewall Middle School, he would probably be so angry that he would slap the kid with a wand. Okay, Hagrid, you can write the receipt. After completing the necessary procedures, Qin Yu said to Hagrid. So, Hagrid took out a lively owl, a quill and parchment from his inner pocket, and wrote a reply to Professor Dumbledore. While Hagrid was writing a reply, Dudley sneaked up on him at some point, took the cake, and ate it with his hands. When Hagrid found out, he waved his umbrella angrily and made a thin pigtail on Dudley's butt. Qin Yu didn't stop him. After all, Dudley had been spoiled since he was a child, so giving him some punishment would teach him a lesson.
Thanks for watching. You can find the next videos in the playlist linked in the info card, directly on my channel, or right here on the screen. And as always, if you have any feedback, feel free to share it in the comments too.